"All right, Woojun, what have you concocted this time?" the head chef asked with a sigh. With a dead serious look, Woojun met his boss's gaze and presented his latest masterpiece, a ratatouille. The chef's eyes started twitching when he realized Woojun had swapped tomatoes for yuzu, but Woojun just insisted that ratatouille and yuzu were a match made in heaven. The chef took a long, deep breath, clearly trying to keep his cool. He then told Woojun to cut it out with the weird experiments and get back to chopping vegetables since his knife skills were second to none. He wrapped it up by telling Woojun to just do a normal job next time. A moment later, he called out, "So who's next up for a tasting?" Out of nowhere, one of the other cooks started screaming at the chef, calling him an arrogant fool. The man raged that he had no right to speak to the heavenly demon that way and demanded he bow down and beg for his life. Woojun couldn't help but think how this was just like the old days when his minions would step in for him, and how his legendary cooking skills from his past life were totally useless here. You see, in his previous life, Woojun was the heavenly demon king, a conqueror of countless realms. But to be honest, taking over the world was never really his thing. Woojun fondly remembered making a plate of fiery fried peppers for one of his loyal followers, revealing that he only conquered those lands because they were getting in the way of his true dream. The elders would always get super anxious whenever the heavenly demon served them another one of his inventive culinary creations. It turns out Woojun's lifelong dream was to become the most celebrated chef in the entire Central Plains. In his new life, he was born in 2011, not long after his parents died in a freak gate accident. The protagonist was adopted by his friend's parents, who even with their own son welcomed him as one of their own. Shortly after, his adoptive father also passed away in another gate-related incident. This tragedy hit Woojun so hard that it unlocked all the memories from his past life. Back in the kitchen, Woojun felt like something wasn't quite right. He remembered thinking he had finally left the world of martial arts behind to pursue his passion for cooking. As he started a new recipe, Woojun thought this was his big chance. The only issue was that most people in this world couldn't stand his food, which left him completely baffled since the elders in his past life absolutely loved it. One of them even fainted from sheer delight. Now our hero is in the middle of making some sausages with vegetables when his adoptive brother Shanho gets home. Shanho immediately noticed a strange smell when he walked in. He then saw Woojun blissfully enjoying the very food he had just cooked up. He eyed him suspiciously and asked if Woojun was responsible for the dish. Woojun just smiled and offered, "Yep, you want to try some?" Shanho was hesitant, but decided to give it a shot, hoping Woojun might have actually gotten better. He was starving anyway, so he figured anything would taste decent, even Woojun's cooking. The moment the food touched his lips, he violently spit it all out. He was convinced that if he'd actually chewed it, he would have dropped dead on the spot. He scrambled for some water, assuming the vegetables must have gone bad. Then, alarmed, he glanced to the side and spotted a bag of cherries sitting on the table. He asked Woojun if he had actually put cherries in the dish. Woojun cheerfully explained he used them instead of sugar because they provide a tart, refreshing kick that sugar just can't match. "Right, I get it," Shanho said, forcing a smile. "I'm going to go hop in the shower. Why don't you go ahead and finish the rest of that?" Woojun reflected on how it's been almost a year since he was reborn, a year he spent completely devoted to cooking. Despite his efforts, the people here just don't get his food. He started wondering how he could change his cooking style so they would finally approve. But when he took another bite of his meal, he thought it was genuinely fantastic. While in the shower, Shanho was fuming about Woojun putting cherries in the dish, thinking his brother must be completely nuts. He couldn't wrap his head around how it tasted so foul and why Woojun was so persistent with his bizarre cooking. After a moment, he realized that Woojun's real gift wasn't cooking. He flashed back to the night their dad was killed by a monster and how Woojun had taken it down effortlessly. He figured Woojun must have awakened his powers that day too, but was just on an entirely different level than him. Shanho came to a startling conclusion: Woojun had to be an S-rank hunter. He thought that if Woojun became a hunter, he would be an absolute legend, and they could team up to avenge their father. Just then, a mysterious girl popped up out of thin air. Looking at Woojun's dish, she announced that it was the second most delicious thing she had ever witnessed. Woojun was a bit taken aback that it wasn't number one. The girl simply continued her analysis. "It's a simple combination of meat, vegetables, and some sauce," she said. "The secret that takes this dish to the next level has to be in the sauce." Woojun was impressed that she actually understood his cooking. The girl then asked if she could know the name of the dish. Woojun told her the dish was called cherry soya, and the girl deduced that the key flavor must come from either the cherry or the soy. As she took a bite, Woojun asked her who she was. The girl revealed that she was the secret spirit of culinary arts. She explained that spirits form contracts with humans to boost their skills, and that she hails from the Cooking Grim dungeon. She claimed she was brought into this world to make it clear that its cuisine was lacking and that people's tastes were unrefined. She boasted that she knew countless recipes that didn't exist in this world, and that the protagonist could learn them all to create the ultimate flavor that no one had ever discovered. The spirit explained that her sole purpose for existing was to achieve that final perfect flavor. She continued saying, she had encountered many chefs, but none of them were good enough to form a contract with her. She added that, until this very moment, that's what she had believed. Still confused, the protagonist asked what she was getting at. The spirit explained that after tasting his dish, she knew he was the one who could create the supreme dish. And with that, she asked Wu Jun to form a contract. But then it dawned on the protagonist that the spirit was attached to an item Shanho had found, meaning she should technically be his brother's. The spirit girl insisted, however, that she hadn't formed a contract with anyone just yet. Wu Jun then said that her offer sounded pretty tempting, but there was one small condition. Suddenly, a beam of light shot down from the sky, and just like that, the contract was sealed. A holographic panel appeared in his vision, announcing that he had become a dungeon chef class. The protagonist was dizzy from all the new information being thrown at him so fast. The spirit girl cheered that their contract was official and told him to check his journal for all the juicy details. Wu Jun glanced at the system window and nearly blew a gasket. Level 1, no recipes, he fumed. After mastering every martial art in the world, this was just plain insulting. The spirit girl immediately went into damage control, frantically explaining, "Wait, no, that's not your level. It doesn't mean you're a total rookie." She clarified that it was actually showing the level and proficiency of his culinary grimoire. The spirit went on to say that Wu Jun could level up through missions and recipes, but the book was locked because he wasn't a hunter. To make matters worse, she told him all the best ingredients were in dungeons he wasn't allowed to enter. Wu Jun processed all this. "Okay, so let me get this straight," he said. "If I become a hunter, I get access to all the recipes." "You got it," the spirit chirped. "The moment you clear the tutorial tower and officially become a hunter, the grimoire's missions and recipes will be all yours." Wu Jun suddenly remembered his brother Xianho mentioning the tutorial tower only opened its doors every 3 months. He glanced at his smartphone as an idea began to form. Wu Jun's boss, stewing with a bit of guilt, thought that maybe he'd been a little too harsh, but ultimately decided that what he said needed to be said. Musing on Wu Jun's performance, the boss acknowledged the kid was a kitchen virtuoso in every sense except for his weird ingredient choices, and somehow managed the workload of 3 people by himself. A new message pinged on the boss's phone. It was from Wu Jun. He braced himself, assuming it was about their blow-up the day before, and felt a fresh wave of regret. But the message wasn't what he expected at all. It was short and to the point. Wu Jun was quitting his job in the kitchen. After the infamous gate incident, mysterious towers had sprouted up all over the globe, and it turned out that anyone who conquered them could wield mana. The insides of these towers shifted and changed with every entry, starting a whole new era of trials. The rule was simple: only those who could overcome the monsters and traps waiting inside would be granted the ability to use mana. Despite the obvious dangers, hopefuls kept pouring into the towers, chasing dreams of wealth and glory, with some even bankrupting themselves just to get through the tutorial levels. The tower's starting floor was thick with desperation and ambition. A hunter was caught off guard when a green slime suddenly lunged at him. He dodged the gooey assault with practiced skill, before closing in and smashing the creature's core. The slime popped like a water balloon. After all that effort, the only loot it dropped was some slime fluid and its core. The hunter was absolutely fuming. He'd taken down 4 of those stupid slimes, and not a single one had dropped a weapon. "Are you kidding me? Just more useless slime fluid. He muttered in frustration. "I've already burned through 20 million just on this tutorial." He collapsed onto the ground, declaring he needed an hour to recharge. As he lay there, he reconsidered. You know what? After all that hard work, he figured he totally deserved a 2-hour break. He was surprised to see a couple of new people wander in. He immediately wrote them off, scoffing at the weirdos for waltzing into a tower without even a shred of leather armor. Those newcomers were, of course, our hero Wu Jun, accompanied by his trusty culinary spirit. Wu Jun marveled at the transportation. Teleported in the blink of an eye, he observed, "This is way more convenient than the techniques we used back in the Central Plains. Your outfit is really standing out from the crowd," the spirit pointed out. Wu Jun sighed. It had been half a year since he'd recovered his memories, and he really thought he was getting the hang of blending into this new society. Wu Jun took a curious look around, checking out what kind of gear the other hunters were rocking. All of a sudden, another hunter shouted a warning, "Hey, you monster, coming your way. Better tag it fast before someone else steals the kill." A slime bounced rapidly toward our protagonist, who seemed completely unfazed, even as the other hunter kept yelling at him to be careful. He took out the slime with a single clean strike. He then thought to himself that he probably should have brought some armor, reminding himself that this was just the beginning and he needed to be cautious. The grimoire's interface popped up, displaying a message. "New ingredients can be recorded. Would you like to register them now?" Woojin stared at the prompt, puzzled. "Ingredients," he wondered aloud. "I guess it means the stuff from that slime I just defeated." Out of nowhere, 3 hunters started shouting at him. "Hey, you jerk," one of them yelled, trying to look tough. "Don't even think about touching that slime's drops." But Woojun was so fascinated by his new cooking system that he didn't hear a word they said. "Yeah, don't play tough with us." One of the other men chimed in. "We've handled way rougher situations than this." The spirit girl got nervous. "Woojun, we're getting some unwanted attention here," she whispered urgently. "Just drop the slime parts and let's go." Woojun finally clued into how awkward the situation had become. He spotted a sword lying nearby and picked it up, settling into a stance. A thought crossed his mind before he showed up. The Central Plains used to be a real mess too. Now in a fighting pose, he remarked, "Well, I guess this will be a good warm-up for climbing the tower." The 3 hunters immediately got on guard, their expressions turning serious. "Looks like this guy's actually looking for a fight," one of them said. "I mean, we can get patched up outside if we get hurt, but it'll kill our chances of making progress today." One of the hunters suggested they should probably leave since they were unarmed, but their leader shot him down and charged right at Woojun. "Having a sword doesn't make you special," the leader yelled. "You're still surrounded by the 3 of us." The protagonist stood there completely unfazed. Woojun thought to himself that if nothing else, at least these guys understood basic military formations. All of a sudden, one of the hunters tried to attack Woojun from behind with a wooden club, but Woojun simply knocked him down and disarmed him with a quick jab from the hilt of his sword. Annoyed, another hunter charged at Woojun. With hardly any effort, Woojun sidestepped the attack, then used the guy's own weapon to send him flying. The last hunter was absolutely terrified and just froze on the spot as Woojun approached. Woojun tossed a wooden club at him, ending the entire scuffle with one last blow. The spirit girl's jaw dropped at the protagonist's flawless moves. Woojun casually commented that if they had been back in the Central Plains, he would have just snapped their necks right then and there. And with that, he walked away reflecting that he had to abide by the laws of this new world. As he moved on, Woojun asked the girl if he was the only one who could see the grimoire screen. The girl explained that all contractors could see one another's grimoires. Woojun then asked if he could register ingredients in the grimoire, and she told him that he could even without being an official hunter. Not wasting another second, Woojun immediately hit yes on the pop-up. Whoa, a screen just popped up announcing that the ingredient slime fluid had been registered. He figured all the other stuff he'd looted must have been logged too, so he started poking around. He landed on a screen for a recipe called slime pudding, but unfortunately, he didn't have permission to check it out. The little spirit gently reminded him again that he couldn't view the recipe just yet. She then launched into a frantic explanation, insisting it wasn't the grimoire's fault. The issue was that he wasn't officially a hunter. She grumbled about how the book had passed through the hands of so many clueless people who never appreciated its real power. With a dramatic flair, she declared that in thousands of years, nobody had ever been as ready for the grimoire as Woojun, and she absolutely could not let him get away. Before the protagonist could even finish his thought, the girl shrieked right in his ear, "I'll agree to anything, just don't cancel the contract." Woojun was completely bewildered as the little spirit burst into tears, begging him not to call things off. He calmly explained that he was just asking if he could invent a new dish that wasn't in the book. Woojun added, "I'm going to make something new. I don't see the point in just blindly following someone else's instructions." Still looking terrified, she whispered, "Was that really all you meant? You're not going to cancel?" Woojun just reassured her, "I never even thought about it." The spirit girl had assumed Woojun was mad about the locked recipe, but he just told her he wasn't used to the system yet and had 0 complaints. The girl stared at him in awe. "I've met a lot of people over the centuries," she said, "but you're the very first one to say you'll cook without a recipe." Forging ahead, the protagonist said that he'd just have to learn by doing. But as he walked, Woojun glanced back, feeling a prickle on his neck. He realized someone was following them, but decided to just keep moving. Lurking in the shadows, the man tailing them seemed to have spotted something unusual. He was stunned to see a grimoire spirit and wondered what on earth a contractor was doing inside a tutorial tower. The protagonist casually opened a jar of slime fluid and dipped his finger inside. A second later, he stuck his finger in his mouth to taste it while the little spirit yelled, "Don't eat that!" In a total panic, she explained that slimes contain poison, not the fatal kind, but definitely enough to cause an unbelievable stomachache. Woojun paid her no mind and just kept chewing thoughtfully. He commented that he'd expected a sweet flavor that would get sickening fast, but it was actually bitter with a nicely balanced spiciness. The girl could only wonder how he was perfectly fine after swallowing poison, while Woojun mused that it would be amazing in desserts or as a seasoning for meat. Still reeling from the shock, the girl managed to say that as long as he wasn't in pain, it was fine, and then asked what kind of dish he was planning to make. Woojun knew that slime fluid contained a fast-acting poison, so he decided to channel yang energy through his hands to neutralize the toxins in the ingredient. He then switched to releasing yin energy to absorb the heat, causing the slime ingredient to solidify. The protagonist broke off a small piece to taste what he'd created. With that, Woojun knew exactly what he would cook, and announced he'd chosen to make a yang gang. As a swarm of slime sloshed toward them, Woojun grinned and said he was going to need plenty of ingredients. A short while later, in the same hallway, the man who'd been following them walked through, noting that something was off because there were way too many weapons just left on the ground. He scooped up one of the spears and saw that while its condition wasn't great, it was still a pretty good weapon. The man realized that the protagonist and the spirit had abandoned all of the equipment and only taken the materials dropped by the slimes. He figured, given the pile of weapons everywhere, they must have been exclusively interested in the slime drops. But even with that figured out, he couldn't understand the reason why. He kept mulling it over, thinking that slime drops were poisonous, and there could only be one reason to gather them inside the tutorial tower. He came to the conclusion that the tower must be hiding some unknown secret. The man started to panic, realizing the future had already been altered, and he began sprinting to find Woojun. He thought to himself that this grimoire contractor was a complete wildcard and he should have made his move sooner. After running for a long time, he finally reached a large chamber. Still catching his breath, he spotted Woojun and his grimoire spirit. Woojun saw the man enter the room and figured this must be the guy who was tailing him. As the two made eye contact, Woojun felt like he already had a good handle on the situation. Woojun guessed the man was probably after his grimoire spirit. The protagonist was mostly just curious how the man was able to see the spirit at all. The mysterious man just kept sizing Woojun up with a suspicious look on his face. He figured Woojun must have wiped out all the slimes in the room based on the items scattered everywhere. The man said he didn't know which grimoire spirit Woojun had, but his incredibly relaxed demeanor was starting to make sense. He saw no way a low-level hunter could have a legendary grimoire spirit unless a very specific group of people had given it to a beginner hunter. The man was pretty sure Woojun was working with that particular group and could sense his powerful aura from across the room. At that point, the man decided to back down, saying that he was only being careful because someone had appeared out of nowhere. He added that he didn't want to fight, but he couldn't help but question why he didn't recognize this guy, while also admitting that Woojun was clearly exceptional and could potentially ruin all his plans. From that moment, the man had a new mission to figure out why the protagonist was collecting slime ingredients. Woojun just relaxed and mentioned that violence between people inside the tower was against the rules. But that rule was basically just for show. All of a sudden, the protagonist began walking toward the mysterious man, causing him to go on high alert, completely unsure of what Woojun was about to do. He braced himself for a fight and said he was certain that Woojun was a part of that particular group. But as Woojun closed the distance, he just smiled and introduced himself. The mysterious man was totally caught off guard by Woojun's friendly attitude. The two of them exchanged greetings, and the man introduced himself as Jo Seong-jun. Playing innocent, he asked Woojun if he happened to see what went down here a little earlier. The man explained that he thought it was strange to see slime equipment just left all over the labyrinth. He kept going, saying that people usually hunt slimes in the tutorial specifically for their equipment drops, so he found it bizarre that someone would go around defeating slimes without picking up the loot. Woojun casually admitted that he was the one who had defeated all the slimes. The man was shocked that Woojun confessed so easily and started to rethink whether he was really part of the group he suspected. He reasoned that the group he had in mind was obsessively secretive about their identities and would never behave this openly. The guy figured Woojun wasn't with that crew, but he still couldn't get a read on his real goal. Playing it safe, he gave a polite nod and said, "That was quite a generous offer you made." Anyway, he continued, "We've both got things to do, so I'll be on my way." Internally, he thought, okay, definitely not one of them. But what's with the obsession with slime drops? So weird. Seong-jun mulled it over. The secret of this tutorial tower wasn't supposed to be discovered for another 20 years. Could this guy possibly know about it already? He wondered. A sudden chilling thought crossed his mind. Wait a second, could I actually know who this guy is? 30 years from now, the world was completely annihilated. But after everything fell apart, Xiangjun was granted a miracle regression. A mysterious power had sent him 30 years into the past to get a second chance. The thing is, in his previous life, he'd never heard of anyone named Wu Jun. If Wu Jun wasn't with the group, he suspected, could it be that he was another regressor just like him? Xiangjun immediately shook his head. No, that's impossible. What a ridiculous idea. His expression turned grim as he walked away. I need to focus. If I lose that hidden piece, my entire plan for the future is toast. Back in the room, Wu Jun watched him go. Heh, what a crafty one. He thought about it for a moment. Xiangjun had kept his guard up the entire time, right up until the handshake, and he didn't even bat an eye when he saw the grimoire spirit. The guy had a heck of a poker face. As the man's figure grew smaller, Wu Jun couldn't shake a funny feeling. Maybe he's more like me than I thought. In any case, the slime population in the tower had certainly taken a major hit. But on the bright side, he'd finally gathered all the ingredients for his new recipe. After a final sweep of the room, he nodded in satisfaction. All right, clean enough to eat in here. Time to get cooking, he announced cheerfully to the little spirit who just gave him a completely blank stare in return. Could I get a pot? Wu Jun asked, still nothing but a confused head tilt. Hello, I can't exactly cook with my bare hands. You're the spirit of a culinary grimoire, right? Surely you've got a trick for whipping up some gear. Suddenly the girl's eyes lit up as if a light bulb had just switched on in her head. Oh, right, she exclaimed and began to wave her hands around, chanting excitedly. With a cheerful pop, a cooking pot materialized out of thin air. Ta-da, she announced, puffing out her chest proudly. I can summon any cooking tools we need any time. Awesome, Wu Jun grinned. In that case, I'll need a spatula and a square mold. And hey, if you could make that spatula out of silicone, that would be amazing. With his kitchen fully equipped, it was time to get down to business. He struck a dramatic pose. Today's main course is yoken. It's the absolute best way to use all these slime parts I've been collecting. Whoa, this slime core is practically glowing, Wu Jun noted. Given its unique texture, I'll use it a bit differently. The trick is to make sure the inner material doesn't mix with the outer fluid. That way I can use it to create some cool patterns. As he sliced into the core, he remarked, it feels kind of rubbery. He decided to chop it up into tiny pieces. Perfect, I'll use these like tapioca pearls. First, he boiled all the slime fluid to purify it of any toxins. Next, he carefully poured the purified liquid into the mold. Just as the edges began to set, he sprinkled in the little cubes of slime core. Now this melted gunk left in the pot, he pointed out, this is the secret sauce. Once it cools down a bit, it becomes the perfect broth. He gently poured the remaining liquid from the pot over the ingredients already in the mold. Then grabbing the spatula, Wu Jun began to carefully swirl the mixture, creating elegant patterns. These swirls aren't just for show, he explained to his floating companion. They change the texture and flavor in every bite, keeping things interesting. To finish it off, he used a quick freezing skill to set the dish. With a deft flip of the wrist, he turned the mold over, and the completed yoken slid out perfectly. And there we have it, he declared with a flourish. One freshly made slime yoken. They both stared at the shimmering, jiggly creation, their eyes wide with delight. Ooh, cut it now, the spirit girl squealed excitedly. Just then, a system window flashed into existence. New recipe registered. Both of them blinked in surprise at the message. The system was now processing the data for the slime yokan that Wu Jun had just invented. A moment later, the results came in. Recipe rank F. Wu Jun's jaw dropped. F rank? You've got to be kidding me. The spirit girl zipped in front of his face. Wait, let it finish. The quality rating hasn't come up yet. Is the quality really that much more important than the rank? Wu Jun asked. Absolutely, she chirped. At that exact moment, another window popped up with a satisfying ping. Congratulations, you have leveled up. A whole flood of notification windows filled his vision, but his eyes were immediately drawn to one in particular. It read, Dish Quality A. Another message followed right after, Achievement. Complete new recipe unlocked. Wu Jun, that's amazing. The girl cheered. An A grade for quality is absolutely incredible. Wu Jun, however, was still scratching his head. But it's an F-rank dish. How can it actually be any good? Remember how you asked about quality versus rank, she said. I'll explain it all while we eat. Sounds good to me, Wu Jun replied, slicing off a perfect translucent piece. Before he could even offer it, the spirit girl zipped over and gobbled it down in one bite. Her eyes went wide, sparkling with pure bliss. "Oh my gosh, this is unbelievably delicious. Making a contract with you was the best decision of my entire life." Munching happily, she began to explain, "So the quality grade is basically a score for how tasty the food is, and getting an A in quality," she added, "means you've whipped up a genuine high-class gourmet dish. As for the overall rank," she continued, "that just represents how difficult the recipe is. Since slime yoken is actually pretty easy to prepare, it got a low rank. That's all there is to it. The higher the quality and the rank, the more points you get," she summed up. "Plus, you can score huge bonuses by completing achievements, which is exactly what you just did." Woojun finally tried a piece for himself, chewing thoughtfully. Wow, it has this bitter and slightly spicy note that just melts into this incredible sweetness, and the chewy texture is really pleasant. Oh, and by the way, the recipe book is officially activated now, the spirit announced. "Recipes are the heart and soul of the dungeon culinary grimoire, you know. You can use the points you earn to buy all sorts of new recipes for every kind of food imaginable." Woojun glanced at his status panel and saw that, sure enough, a whole list of dishes had been unlocked. The girl noticed his calm expression. "You don't seem that impressed," she observed. Then her face lit up. "Oh, I get it. It's probably no big deal to you since you just invented your very own A-quality dish from scratch. So, do I have enough points to just buy all of these?" Woojun asked, scrolling through the list. "Well," she began, "you earned a ton of points, but there is a small catch. Normally," she explained, "you're supposed to unlock recipes by completing missions. You start with simple stuff to gradually build up your skills over time." Woojun's eyes widened. "So I basically skipped the entire training montage." The girl nodded enthusiastically. "You sure did. The whole system is designed for you to do missions which unlock recipes, which helps you level up, which gives you access to even better recipes." She floated closer, her voice filled with awe. "In all the thousands of years this grimoire has existed, nobody has ever just created a brand new high-level recipe out of thin air and jumped straight to level 4 on their first try." It dawned on Woojun that he'd actually leveled up and scored some points just by inventing a new dish, no quest needed, and the girl happily confirmed it, giving him the green light to keep on cooking. He remembered that the grimoire only hands out missions to hunters, so his first instinct was to just blitz through the area and get the tower over with. But then a thought stopped him. This dungeon could be a gold mine for undiscovered ingredients, and it felt like a real shame to just bail so quickly. With that new plan in mind, he decided to whip up a few more dishes, especially since the tower wasn't closing for another 2 weeks. Woojun made it to the second floor and immediately got snagged by an arrow trap, which, while not a huge deal, was a clear sign that things had changed up here. He noticed the traps were way more sophisticated and the slimes had picked up some unique traits, making them a bigger pain to handle. Anyone who just breezed through the first floor would now have to actually focus on surviving the second, but for Woojun this was hardly a challenge. After all, he marched to the beat of his own drum, so with the fighting done, he was already prepping another creation, a red slime jelly with a solid B-level quality rating. As the girl dug into the jelly, raving about how it was a brilliant idea that shattered all expectations, Woojun just sighed and muttered that he'd failed again. She immediately disagreed, asking what in the world was wrong with this wonderful dish, and reminding him that he'd already cranked out tons of food in the past 10 days. She pointed out that the grimoire had hit level 3, and he'd banked another 15 points, but Woojun was still moping, convinced it was all because of his own incompetence. He eventually concluded, however, that the real roadblock to a higher rating was the limited ingredients, seeing as he'd been scouring 2 entire floors for 10 days straight. Woojun thought back, the first floor only had basic green slimes, and while the second offered a variety of types, a slime-only menu was still pretty restrictive. He grumbled that if he could just get his hands on a little chocolate, his dish would have been absolutely perfect. The spirit girl, who'd been listening to all this, seemed a bit concerned, and told Woojun he had more natural talent than any chef she'd ever seen, but he needed some basic knowledge to get great results. She went on, explaining that a passion for creating new things is a chef's best quality, and that his talent was being held back by a lack of knowledge about the grimoire. In the end, she argued that it was way more important for him to build a solid foundation by practicing existing recipes instead of trying to invent new ones all the time. Woojun chewed on what she'd said, realized she was totally right, and decided to go back to square one, asking her what they should tackle next. He came across a dish called King Slime Ice Cream, and the name alone made him do a double take. Intrigued, he decided that this was definitely the recipe he wanted to try. As he checked the ingredients, it dawned on him that he hadn't seen a single monster that looked like a king slime anywhere in the tower, and he wondered if he'd have to leave to find one. But before he could even decide what to do, it was revealed that the king slime was conveniently located on the 3rd floor of the tower. He let out a cheer, realizing he'd already found the entrance to the 3rd floor and that things were finally starting to go his way. So with the king slime as their target, Woo-jun, and the spirit girl started heading for the 3rd floor. It had now been 10 days since Woo-jun entered the portal, and back in Sioux City, the entrance was swarmed with reporters. Today was the day when the challengers who had successfully cleared the 3rd floor were expected to emerge from the portal. 2 guys watching the scene commented that anyone coming out today had already been snapped up by guilds and that they were just waiting for a deal to fall through. They were wondering who would be the first to step out when suddenly a figure appeared. It was Baka, the first daughter of the Chenik Guild's leader. The reporters went into a frenzy, desperate to interview the amazing rookie and asking if she planned on joining her father's guild. She arrogantly announced she was refusing any interview that wasn't pre-scheduled and ordered them to clear a path. One of the onlookers muttered that it was unfair, and his buddy asked him why. The man explained it was unfair because she was gorgeous, came from a powerful family, and was incredibly talented, to boot telling his friend to keep an eye out for someone they could actually recruit. One of them argued that no one who made it to the 3rd floor would join a small-time guild like theirs, but the other shot back that there are always exceptions to the rule. The man in glasses complained that they had to hang around for another 4 days since all the A-listers come out on the 10th day, making the 13th their last real chance to find anyone promising. He added that anyone straggling out on the 14th day is just a quitter or completely useless, so they were stuck waiting. Back in the tower, Woo-jun was still battling slimes, and he noted that the layout of the 3rd floor was completely different from the 1st and 2nd. He observed that where the first 2 floors had been massive labyrinths, this one was sectioned off into separate rooms. All of a sudden, he spotted a doorway that looked nothing like the others and figured it had to be some kind of special room. Woo-jun ambled over to the new door, and the moment he stepped across the threshold, he found himself in a full-blown forest. He blinked, thinking, okay, a whole forest inside the tower. That's definitely not in the brochure. Hey, did we somehow get outside? The spirit girl asked, looking totally lost. Woo-jun shook his head and grinned. I'm guessing no. Unless the outside world suddenly has a serious slime infestation I don't know about. Venturing deeper, he saw an altar that appeared to be dedicated to a slime, and at that moment his culinary system pinged, announcing a special ingredient had been detected and that unlocking the recipe would cost 20 points. Woo-jun was now positive the king slime was in here and immediately confirmed the mission, remarking that this system had even more handy features than he first thought. Woo-jun sensed someone coming up behind him. It was Xiong-jun, who had just arrived. Xiong-jun mentioned it took him longer than he'd like to get there, all while suspecting Woo-jun had come here alone for the unknown hidden piece. Woo-jun just gave him a friendly smile and said, hey, look, who made it to the 3rd floor? Xiong-jun explained that you only get one shot at the tutorial tower, so he wanted to see it all the way through, adding that it was pretty impressive Woo-jun had made it this far too. Woo-jun mentioned there was something in this room he needed to get his hands on, and for Xiong-jun that was all the proof he needed. He was now certain Woo-jun was after the hidden piece as well. He claimed he was exhausted from the journey and needed to rest for a bit, but his real goal was to stick around and watch what Woo-jun was planning. So, are we summoning the Slime King now, or what? The spirit girl asked eagerly, only for Woo-jun to shake his head. Now, we're running low on slime juice. Gotta go grind for more mats. From a distance, Xiong-jun put 2 and 2 together, realizing Woo-jun was farming slimes to call out the big boss. A system window confirmed his hunch. 200 slime fluids and 200 slime cores were needed for the summoning. With the tower set to close in just 4 days, Xiong-jun cooked up a simple plan he'd just watch Woo-jun do all the legwork and then swoop in to steal the boss kill at the last second. By the 12th day, Woo-jun was effortlessly mowing down slimes and raking in the loot. Little did he know Xiong-jun was hiding nearby, tracking his every single move like a hawk. Woo-jun just kept clearing out every slime he came across in the woods, completely unaware that he had a stalker. The cycle continued until, before they knew it, the 13th day had passed. On day 14, it dawned on Xiong-jun that the tower would be closing the very next day. He reminded himself that this was his one shot to get the unknown piece from the tutorial tower. He really didn't want to wait another 3 months for the portal to reopen. Xiong-jun watched Woo-jun keep gathering slime parts and figured the guy must already know the recipe for summoning the king. He guessed Woo-jun was just biding his time, which was fine by him. He then noticed Woo-jun munching on some questionable, toxic-looking monster bits and had a wild thought, wait, Does his magic book have some kind of skill that makes monsters edible? That'd be insanely useful for survival, he mused before shaking his head. It was a neat trick, but he needed to focus on how to snag the boss without Woo-jun catching on. Seong-jun had noticed a pattern over the last 4 days. Woo-jun would disappear for about 30 minutes to 2 hours at a time. The guy's return schedule was totally random, which made it a huge gamble, but it was the only shot he had. He wondered, can I really take down the boss and get the unknown piece in just 30 minutes? Realizing that he who hesitates is lost, he decided to go for it. With all the materials now in his possession, he would summon the boss the very next chance he got. The second Woo-jun vanished from the area, Seong-jun made his move and raced toward the summoning spot. Standing at the altar, he carefully placed all the slime ingredients he'd gathered. Then he held his breath, waiting for the main event to start. He was still feeling a bit antsy when a brilliant light shot down from the sky, bathing the altar in its glow. In a flash, a massive black slime wearing a tiny crown appeared, immediately smashing the ground and wrecking the whole area. The impact kicked up a cloud of dust, blinding Jun for a moment. Seizing the opportunity, the Slime King launched its first attack straight at him. Miles away, Woo-jun suddenly stopped walking, which his spirit companion found odd. With a grim look, he announced, "Something's wrong. We need to get back to the altar now." The fight was already in full swing. The Slime King slammed down at Jun, but he sidestepped the attack with ease. Seong-jun then charged in for a counterattack, driving his spear forward with all his might. His weapon punched a clean hole right through the slime's chest, and the creature actually recoiled in pain. "Ha, it's working," Seong-jun thought with a smirk. He reflected that it had been 6 months since he'd come back from the future, and just knowing what was coming wasn't nearly enough. Right on cue, the Slime King flew into a rage. As the slime charged again, Seong-jun easily dodged, thinking about how his careful planning had already saved the world once. In one fluid movement, he vaulted onto the monster's back, yelling, "I'm not taking a single day off!" In a heartbeat, he was airborne, ready to plunge his mana-infused spear down into the beast. He wrapped his spear in a shimmering aura and unleashed a devastating strike from above, crashing down on the slime. After the blow landed, he again noted how much damage his attacks were doing. Before the boss could even think about hitting back, he zipped away to a safe distance. "And so my fighting skills are way beyond what they used to be," he thought confidently. As he dodged another attack, he declared, "At this rate, grabbing that unknown piece will be a piece of cake." Meanwhile, Woo-jun had already returned and was casually watching the fight from the sidelines. "Hey," he commented to himself, "the kid's not half bad." He could see that instead of trying to brute force his way through the Slime King's power, Jun was skillfully redirecting its momentum and adding his own strength to his counters. Woo-jun noted that the kid looked about his age, but his combat experience was clearly that of a seasoned veteran. He also noticed a strange energy glowing at the tip of Seong-jun's spear. It was a faint aura, but it definitely wasn't coming from a spirit contract. Woo-jun realized the kid had some unique abilities beyond standard internal energy. "If he were my student, he could be incredible," he thought. The spirit girl piped up, "This is our chance, let's jump in and finish it." But Woo-jun immediately shot her down. "Absolutely not," he said sternly. "That would be incredibly rude." He remembered how his master, Shanho, went ballistic when someone stole his dungeon boss kill. These tower climbers, he figured, were probably just as territorial. It's just common courtesy to let him finish what he started," Woo-jun declared, settling in to watch as the battle between Seong-jun and the Slime King grew even more frantic. Seong-jun was clearly starting to struggle. "Man, even after all that training, taking this thing on by myself is tough," he gasped, noticing his mana was almost completely empty. As the slime reared up for another blow, he knew this might be his last shot. He slid right under the attack, thinking, "If I can just pierce its core right now, this should be over." He was so close to finally getting his hands on that unknown piece he'd been chasing, but as his spear found its mark, something felt wrong. Just as the slime began to topple, he looked up and saw Woo-jun standing there again. His jaw dropped. "No way. That's impossible. The pattern I figured out over the past 4 days, it didn't work today," Seong-jun muttered in disbelief. In that split second of distraction, the Slime King landed a brutal hit that sent Seong-jun flying through the air until he slammed hard into a tree trunk. Lying in a heap, he groaned, "I missed my shot, and all because I looked at him, so..." He tried to push himself up, but winced in pain. "This wound is too bad," he admitted. "I don't think I can get up." He let out a bitter, frustrated laugh. "After everything, I'm still just a pathetic failure. How stupid was I to think I could actually change the future?" Just because he'd returned to the past, he'd gotten arrogant, thinking he was special. It was clear he'd lost someone precious to him in the grim future he came from. But even now, Seongjun wasn't ready to give up. He clenched his jaw and through sheer willpower began to push himself to his feet. "It doesn't matter if I'm arrogant or a failure," he growled. If he keeps thinking like that, he's never going to change a thing about the future. He couldn't help but remember all the times he'd been on the verge of total collapse and the crushing regret that followed each one. It dawned on him that if he'd just pushed himself with more grit, he might have succeeded. A new fire lit within him as he swore he wouldn't make the same dumb mistakes all over again. Seongjun snapped awake, his eyes blazing with fury. He was ready to burn his own life force to take down this monster, absolutely refusing to give up now. As he focused his energy into the tip of his spear, he thought, if I lose to something like this, I can forget about ever changing the future. He was absolutely determined to obliterate the Slime King. With that, he lunged forward to attack the slime. But just before his spear could connect, a searing pain shot through him. His assault came to a grinding halt as he started coughing up blood. "My body's in terrible shape," he sputtered. With the slime rearing up for another attack, he figured this was the end of the line. But right before the lights went out, he saw a flash of light tear straight through the Slime King. He couldn't quite process what was happening before he blacked out completely. Woojun had swooped in and saved Seongjun at the very last second. A system window popped up in front of Woojun announcing that the Slime King had been defeated. He snagged a couple of items, the Slime King core and some Slime King fluid. The spirit girl was floored that Woojun had taken down the boss in a single hit, remarking that she expected nothing less from him. Looking down at Seongjun crumpled on the floor, Woojun just shook his head and called him a total disgrace. Woojun pointed out that the moment Seongjun spotted him on the battlefield, his concentration broke completely. That's when he took a huge hit and started to panic. Woojun added that trying to pull out more energy when his body was already a wreck was just plain reckless, which is why he was in such a mess. But honestly, even in that awful state, he still had a clear shot to get away. Woojun figured it out, then realizing Seongjun was really after the Slime King's core. Knowing the guy could still hear him, Woojun said flatly, "If I hadn't stepped in, you'd be dead right now." Then Woojun announced that he'd be taking the core as a little finder's fee for the rescue. After taking down the boss, Woojun had to admit he was genuinely curious what a Slime King tasted like. The moment he took a bite of the slime, the flavor hit him like a ton of bricks. He commented that despite being intensely sour, it had a surprising sweetness and a super smooth texture. It was actually delicious, kind of like durian, the king of all fruits. After tasting the slime, he declared that it was a boss for a reason. He just couldn't help himself. He had to cook it right then and there. He started running through his options and figuring out a plan. Checking out the recipe, he was expecting something really special since the main ingredient came from the Slime King. Instead, the instructions seemed way too basic, like something important was missing. The little spirit girl quickly piped up, assuring him that the recipe was perfectly fine. After she said that, Woojun shrugged and said if she was sure he'd just follow the directions. To start, he began to boil the slime fluid, which was supposed to add a sweet flavor. Next, he froze some slime cubes so he could grind them into a powder later. He then used a technique called Black Abyss to envelop one of the frozen slime cubes. As soon as the dark aura surrounded the cube, it was completely obliterated inside, grinding it down to dust. Woojun mused that this martial art was originally made for cooking, but back on the Central Plains, it had ended up hurting a lot of people. After that, he sprinkled the powdered cubes into the original fluid. Then he grabbed a spatula and started mixing it all together. He noticed that once he added the powder, the mixture's viscosity shot way up, which he found pretty cool. He remarked that, according to the recipe, this trick works on all slimes. It struck him that this was a totally different method than how he'd melted cubes before, and he thought about how much the shelf life of ingredients can change depending on how you cook them. He found the whole thing fascinating as he put the finishing touches on the dish. And just like that, the Slime King ice cream was ready. His system identified the creation as an A+ ranked dish with A-level quality. Woojun also got a flood of notifications that he'd gained a ton of experience, unlocked a bunch of achievements, and leveled up like crazy. After he was done, he announced that it was complete and that they should give it a try. The spirit girl eagerly agreed. Just as they were about to dig into the ice cream, they heard a groan from nearby. Seongjun was starting to come to. The first thing he asked was how long he'd been out. Seongjun noted that his mana hadn't fully recovered yet, and that he woke up way sooner than he should have. He complained that his entire body felt like it was on fire. He could feel that a few of his ribs were cracked, but at least he could still move. Then he saw Woojun up ahead doing something odd. Seongjun was sure he wasn't imagining things. He remembered Woojun finishing off the Slime King right before he passed out. He then noticed Woojun was holding something in his hands. It was the unknown piece. Xiangjun admitted to himself that he'd been way too careless, and because of it, Wujun had gotten his hands on the unknown piece from the tutorial tower, the one item that only shows up once and never again. Xiangjun grumbled about how his plans had gone up in smoke. He'd even thought about trying to hide the piece or maybe jumping Wujun while he was busy with the slime. He stewed over all the opportunities he'd lost because of Wujun, but then decided there was no use crying over spilled milk. He took a deep breath to calm down, reminding himself that not all was lost. He came to the conclusion that Wujun wasn't about to share the unknown piece, which meant he'd just have to take it by force. Right then, he started mustering his strength, getting ready to stand up and snatch it. But before he could make a move, Wujun turned and offered him some of the ice cream. Xiangjun was totally baffled and just stared in silence, completely confused by the whole situation. Wujun told him he should have some too, since he must be wiped out. Xiangjun mumbled a thanks, wondering why on earth Wujun would be willing to share with him. He figured this was a golden opportunity, and decided he might as well roll with it. He had no clue why Wujun was giving him this, but he guessed it was probably fine since you weren't supposed to kill each other in the tutorial tower. The second he took a bite of the ice cream, it felt like his brain just exploded. He seriously questioned if Wujun was really a gourmet contractor, because what in the world was this hellish flavor? Is this even edible? Is this actually food? He wondered. It made no sense. He could understand the gourmet spirit being weird. It wasn't human after all. But this guy was definitely human. How was he managing to eat this stuff? Despite the taste, he kept eating, telling himself that since this was the unknown piece, he had to get it down for the sake of the future. He scooped up another spoonful of the ice cream, forcing himself to just bear with it and push through. As soon as he swallowed it, a system window popped up in front of him. The system informed him that by eating the Slime King ice cream, he had been infused with the slime's pure energy, and his abilities had all received a boost. Whoa, his mana just jumped by 5 points. He's completely floored, muttering about how he's never seen unidentified items give stat buffs before. It clicks for him. The grimoire is boosting his stats through what he eats. Just then, Wujun calls over to a still baffled Xiangjun and asks with a hopeful smile, "So how was the meal?" Xiangjun recalls that the main ingredient was a monster and figures Wujun gave it his all. He forces a smile and replies, "You know it was actually pretty good." Wujun's eyes widen. "Wait, are you serious?" Changing the subject. Xiangjun thanks Wujun again for saving his hide earlier. As he studies Wujun's face, a peculiar feeling washes over him. Yep, he thinks, now I'm positive. The realization hits him like a freight train. He needs to bolt right now. He's absolutely certain that if he sticks around any longer, Wujun will force-feed him another one of his culinary creations. Xiangjun quickly starts backing away, thanking him again for the rescue and the meal. But before he can make a clean getaway, Wujun beams, "Don't leave yet, I have a bunch of other dishes I want you to try." Without a second thought, Xiangjun turns and sprints, yelling over his shoulder, "I couldn't possibly trouble my savior anymore. Thanks for everything." Watching him disappear, Wujun just sighs and says, "What a shame." The spirit girl chimes in, "See, he totally appreciated your cooking. I guess that makes me the only one in the world who really gets it." Wujun just shrugs. "Maybe we'll run into him again sometime." The spirit girl reminds him, "Tomorrow is our last day in this tower. We should probably go find some more ingredients." Back in Seoul, the clock is ticking with only 2 hours left until the tutorial portal closes for good. Right on cue, Wujun steps through the spirit girl, tagging along right behind him. It feels amazing to breathe some fresh air after so long," she exclaims happily. Wujun simply says, "All right, let's head back." And the girl readily agrees. A system notification pings in Wujun's vision, congratulating him on clearing the tutorial tower. It declares he is now officially a hunter, unlocking his access to the status window and inventory. Wujun is amazed as he reads about the new features, but a prickling sensation on his neck makes him whip around his hand, instinctively shooting out to grab a shimmering spirit. He lets his full aura flare, bearing down on the little spirit that had been floating nearby. With a stone-cold expression, he demands, "What are you—" The terrified girl squeaks, "Chef, calm down, will ya?" At that moment, another system window pops up, asking if he'd like a tutorial on how to use his new inventory and status window. He pauses, wondering what would happen if he just said no. After mulling it over for a second, he figures, what the heck, and decides to accept. In an instant, the spirit starts to merge directly into his body, and to Wujun's surprise, he finds the whole thing rather fascinating. He quickly figures out that he can open his status and inventory just by thinking about it, allowing him to check his stats or manage his items anytime he wants. The system window then displayed his new daily quests, cook a meal within a dungeon, and serve it to another person. Huh, that's a lot simpler than I expected. Woojun comments, and the spirit girl confirms, yep, those are your dailies. Woojun considers it. The cooking part is no big deal since he does it constantly, but the real hurdle is going to be getting someone else to actually eat it. If it comes down to it, Ancient, he thinks, I'll just have to force feed it to Shanho. As if on cue, a loud voice bellows, you little brat, you actually went into the portal without telling me. And who else would it be but Shanho, who storms up complaining that he's been waiting around all day for Woojun. Woojun is completely surprised. What are you even doing here? Shanho explains that he came to pick him up, adding a grudging, congratulations on clearing the 3rd floor, by the way. Not one to beat around the bush, Shanho gets straight to business. Join my guild, he says. The scene then shifts to Woojun and the spirit girl walking down a street with the girl pointing and saying, oh, we're here. She stares in awe at the incredible architecture of the Hunter Academy. Woojun, looking equally impressed, confirms, yeah, this is the place. Back on the walk home, Woojun and Shanho were locked in an argument about the guild offer. Woojun insisted he wasn't skilled enough, but Shanho just scoffed, don't give me that. You think I believe you only cleared the 1st floor. Shanho pitches his offer. I already put your name in. All you have to do is pass the practical test and you're in my guild. This is a huge opportunity. Even with that, Woojun flat out refuses, and Shanho looks like he's about to blow a gasket. Shanho rattles off all the benefits, equipment, perks, a schedule customized to his abilities, and asks, why on earth are you turning this down? Woojun's reply, that's exactly why, nearly sends Shanho over the edge. That's when Woojun drops the bombshell. The only reason I became a hunter was to get better at cooking. Shanho is left completely speechless. You mean you didn't ditch your dream of being a chef when you went into the tower? Shanho asks, baffled. Never, Woojun states firmly. Shanho explodes. You're going to regret this so much, you moron. They both stop in their tracks, and Woojun asks, why is that? Shanho spells it out for him, because if you don't register with a guild in 1 week, the government will force you into the Hunter Academy. Woojun looks confused by the name. The Hunter Academy. Shanho confirms grimly, you heard me. Shanho goes on to explain that it's a government-run institution for hunters where the treatment is awful and that it's next to impossible to transfer to a private guild once you're in. Shanho warns that the place is rife with discrimination and that their whole educational system is ancient. Shanho explains that the academy can get students into any dungeon in Young with an observer, but cautions that the risks are far greater than they seem. Woojun's interest is piqued when he hears they can enter any dungeon. I'll think it over, he says, but I'm pretty wiped out right now. Seeing how exhausted Woojun is, Shanho finally decides to let it go. As they part, Shanho gives him one last warning. Just make up your mind before you get dragged off to that academy. Woojun promises, I'll decide as soon as I can. Woojun gets a text on his phone and is reminded that he has only until next week. It's an official notice from the Hunter Academy driving home, the point that he needs to choose wisely. While whipping up another dish, Woojun thinks about how the tower's ingredients were so limited, mostly just slimes, while the outside world offers an amazing variety to work with. Woojun figures that with this he can whip up some new recipes and probably gain 2 more levels this week. However, he still hadn't managed to complete the mission to serve his food to someone else. He'd offered some to Shanho, but Shanho shot him down, saying he'd only eat it if Woojun agreed to join his guild. Woojun mutters to himself, what an ungrateful punk. The spirit girl says, that's a real shame, then asks, if you enroll in the Hunter Academy, will you still get to be a chef? Woojun states with absolute certainty, that's the entire reason I became a hunter. No matter where I go, even the academy, I'm going to keep cooking. All of a sudden, Woojun gets a call from Shanho. He assumes Shanho must have heard about his plans for the academy, so he immediately declines the call, grumbling, that ungrateful brat. So Woojun finally rolls up to the Hunter Academy. Right off the bat, his spirit sidekick chimes in that the place has a pretty unique vibe. They spot some kid who's totally pumped to become a hunter, but at the same time, you can see he's already stressing about his future. While checking out the crowd, the spirit girl remarks that it sure takes all kinds. Woojun, on the other hand, is just impressed that for a refurbished old high school, the hallways and gym are surprisingly spotless. Woojun overhears some students gossiping about a guy named Jay, talking about an article that mentioned he cleared the 3rd floor and that he's a dead ringer for the photo. Baxil is also in the crowd, and she's getting some looks from people wondering why she's even here, seeing as she's already a member of the Chianic Guild. Her being there gets Woojun curious about what her whole deal is. Then he spots Si Hongjun and thinks to himself that he really wasn't expecting that guy to show up. The spirit girl points out someone on stage telling Woojun to get a load of him. She cracks a joke that the guy's head is as smooth as a griffin's egg. Right on cue, the entrance ceremony gets underway, and it's time to hear from the Academy director. The director makes his way to the stage and gets ready to speak. He kicks things off by introducing himself as the director of the Hunter Academy, Li Qianjai. The students are a little taken aback by his super intense tone as Li Qian starts talking about how seriously bothered he is by the Hunter Academy's declining reputation. For Woojun, the energy coming off this speech feels oddly familiar. It reminds him of his most loyal subordinate, the leader of the 3 demons from the celestial demonic sect. The director plows on, saying there are a ton of reasons for the mess they're in, but the real issue is the dishonesty and bad attitudes of the students themselves. That's when it clicks for Woojun, and he mutters that the blood demon Guachi is here as well. And there he was, the leader of the celestial demonic sect's 3 demons. Woojun is shocked to see Elder Guak in this world, just as the director starts ranting about the chaos of the gate incident from 30 years ago. He remembers Elder Guak as his most loyal and fierce soldier, and recalls Chaeyon once saying that Gujiang Mayong, the leader of the Ju family, was a lot like him. Jiang never relied on items getting strong through sheer training alone, and now the director is demanding to know what happened to the hunters of today. He asks who in their right mind would go into the tutorial tower without protection, while Woojun just thinks to himself that the elder seems happy here and decides he's going to help him out. Shan Jan is watching all this with fascination, staring at the director, and admitting to himself that he just can't, for the life of him, remember who the guy is. He recalls that this man took down B-rank monsters all by himself, and that Li Qian was definitely there during the gate incident. He mentions that after doing a little digging on HunterNet, he confirmed that Li Qian's story was 100% true. Shanjian mulls over why a guy with that kind of skill would just be an academy director. He also knows for a fact that before his regression, the director was not Li Che Yongji, and that's not the kind of basic detail he'd ever forget. Shanjian comes to a conclusion he needs to track down the other changes his regression caused, and that's the exact reason he came to the academy. With a completely serious face, he resolves that this was only the beginning. He has to investigate everything that changed because he went back in time. Suddenly, an instructor starts yelling out directions, telling the students to hit a mannequin with everything they've got. After the hit, their score would pop up in front of them. He finishes up by saying this is just a quick test to see where everyone stands, and he'll explain all the academy rules after they're done. The instructor adds that for anyone who uses weapons, they can practice with the ones on the left, and then he asks if there are any questions. A girl raises her hand and asks why on earth they have to do it 5 times when 1 hit should be enough. The teacher explains it's to measure how long they can maintain their top power output. Another student then asks what the vice director's personal best score was. The teacher just says that he's a B-rank hunter, and that it would probably be easier for them to just use that as a benchmark. He then says if there are no more questions, they'll get started and tells them to line up. The first girl steps up and lands her first hit, scoring 302 points. The next boy in line throws a punch and gets a score of 272. Another young man follows and smacks the mannequin for 403 points. Woojun, watching all this, thinks he's pretty much figured out the scoring criteria. He sees a couple of new techniques, but overall, the skill level is kind of pathetic. The spirit girl spotted someone she knew. The next one up to the plate was Shanjian. Woojun figures. Shanjian must have been holding back before because he was around. Curious to see what he'll do now, Woojun estimates that based on the moves he saw earlier, he should be able to hit around 19,000 points. And then Shanjian hits the mannequin, clocking in at a grand total of 3,097 points. Woojun immediately realizes he's hiding his real strength, remembering how he charged his spear with energy back in the tower. Woojun keeps thinking that sure, the score was fantastic and beat everyone else's, but Shanjian definitely has a reason for keeping his true power under wraps. A buzz goes through the other participants when they realize it's finally her turn. The next contestant was Bax Seal, who was already walking toward the mannequin. Everyone was wondering just how many points Bax Seal would pull. She started breathing deeply, getting ready for her attack, as a blue aura of intense focus flared up around her body. In less than a heartbeat, she closed the gap, with blinding speed charged the mannequin and landed her attack. All the other students were completely stunned by the incredible speed she showed when she hit the mannequin. The scoring machine was busy crunching the numbers. And with that one incredible attack, she hit 10,793 points, a perfect score that she made look completely effortless. All the participants are just shocked and a little scared after seeing her nail a perfect score. Some guys wonder if she's using some kind of artifact, but they can tell she's not. Woo-jun then takes his turn and scores a whopping 222 points. With that, he decides it's probably best to sit this particular contest out. Sean-jan and Bak Seal's crazy high scores instantly became the hottest gossip among the students, prompting Woo-jun to enroll in the academy after getting the rules from Min's. A little while later, we see the inside of the Hunter Academy dormitory. Woo-jun, who's already cooking, comments to himself that the dorm isn't so bad. He then notes that there's a different kind of freedom here compared to back home. Turns out while he was messing around in the kitchen, he discovered that a blue slime base pairs amazingly well with salad. His brother kept warning him that the academy would just take advantage of him, but Woo-jun couldn't figure out why he'd bother with the guild instead. After all here, he had the freedom to cook for everyone whenever he wanted. On top of all that, the classes were surprisingly engaging. He was finally getting to dive into the essential theories about all the common dungeon monsters. He found it funny how the other students grumbled about being able to find everything on the internet, completely overlooking how valuable it was to learn from an actual instructor. And then it suddenly clicked. Oh shoot, what time is it? He remembered there was something he absolutely had to do today and needed to get a move on before it was too late. Meanwhile, over at the Hunter Academy gym, the instructor called everyone to attention, a clear sign that a new activity was about to get underway. The instructor got right to it. All right, settle down. As we discussed today marks your very first official mission. I'm about to read out the team assignments for the dungeon crawl. I'll be calling out the student names along with the observer class hunters, he continued. Each team will be tasked with navigating a low-level dungeon under their observer's guidance. Just like that, the instructor began calling out the names. A real dungeon mission, Woo-jun could feel the excitement building inside him. As the instructor rattled off the names one by one, he got to the next group. All right, next up we have Yu Seon Ark Ilho. And your observer hunter will be Yu Woo-jun Kim. He continued down the list. Kim Jang and Lee Ji Yi, you're paired up. Your observer is Kim Jong-do. And for the final team, the instructor announced Chan Woo-jin and Bak Xiong. Woo-jun's head shot up. Bak Xiong, the girl who scored a whopping 10,000 points, he was going to be on a team with her. From the look on her face, she was clearly overjoyed to be partnered with a hunter who barely scraped by. The instructor then dropped the bombshell. Your observer hunter will be Kimchi Guk. Gasps echoed through the gym. Everyone knew that name belonged to the legendary hunter from the Ju family. Well, he certainly seems popular, the spirit girl chimed in. And that wrapped up the team assignments for the day. The instructor then laid out the next step. Now that the observers have been introduced, go find your assigned teams. Most of them are academy regulars, but a few are special guests. Right on cue, the main doors swung open. Your objective, the instructor boomed, is to clear the dungeon under your observer's command. As the guest hunters filed in, students began scanning the crowd for their team leaders. The moment Kimchi Guk walked through the doors, the entire gym started buzzing. Is that really him? I can't believe the academy actually managed to recruit him. Spotting them, Kimchi Guk sauntered right over to Woo-jun's team. Yo, I'm just going to speak casually cool with that. The girl just shrugged. Sure, whatever. Inside, Kim was already scheming. This was the perfect chance to earn some brownie points he could trade for a favor from Shianek. He leaned in conspiratorially. Look, I turned down a lecturer position here, you know. The only reason I took this gig is because of my ties to Chianek and the Ju family. It's not every day you get to learn from a B-rank hunter like me. The girl's eyes went cold. Let's get one thing straight, she said firmly. Here I am, Cadet Bak Xiong of the academy, not Chianek's daughter from the Baek Du-yang Guild. That shut him up. Ah, right, Kim stammered, looking totally uncomfortable. Understood. I'll watch what I say. Wow, this guy is seriously annoying, the spirit girl whispered, watching the whole exchange. He's acting like you're not even here. Woo-jun, however, kept his thoughts to himself and simply watched things unfold. Trying to recover, Kim pulled out his phone. I've already gone through the list of available dungeons, he said, showing the screen to his two new teammates. They're all designed for training, obviously. Bak did a double take when she saw the location. Are you serious? We're actually going there. With a grim look, Kim confirmed their destination. Yep, the Killer Bee dungeon. Before long, they were at Nangaroo Station, right at the entrance to the Killer Bee dungeon. I know it looks like a nice quiet park, Kim explained, but there's a reason most hunters steer clear even with its F-rank rating. The culprit's killer bees. They might be F-rank monsters, but they're notoriously vicious. Bak immediately started to worry, thinking this dungeon was far too risky for someone like Woo-jun. She remembered his scores from the placement test were basically at the bottom of the barrel, and he didn't seem to know which end of a sword was the pointy one. Pulling Woo-jun aside, she lowered her voice. Hey, this place is really dangerous. Don't you think we should talk to Hunter Guk and reconsider? But Kim overheard them and jumped in. "Don't worry your pretty little heads. As long as a B-rank hunter like me is here, everything will be fine." He then turned to Woojun, snapping his fingers. "And you are—" Woojun just gave his name, and they had a brief, awkward greeting. "Right, Woojun," Kim continued. "Still, I guess we can't count you out entirely. Anyone who clears the tower has to have at least a few tricks up their sleeve to stay alive." Throughout all this, Woojun remained perfectly stone-faced, just taking in the conversation. Kim went on to justify his choice. "All the other guilds are just dumping their rookies into the standard low-level dungeons. Those places are so overcrowded now, you can't get any decent practice in." He had a point, Woojun thought. In any of the easier dungeons, Bak would just obliterate everything and he'd be left standing around. "My goal," Kim stated, "is to make sure you two get the absolute most out of this training session." He wrapped up his little speech by saying, "So basically, unless a dungeon boss or a C-rank monster decides to pop up out of nowhere, this will be a walk in the park. And hey, this dungeon is notorious for not even having a boss," he added casually. "So that's one less thing to stress about. Any final objections before we dive in?" Bak didn't say a word, figuring his logic checked out. The spirit girl, meanwhile, was getting more and more annoyed by Kim's condescending tone. Stepping inside the dungeon, Kim immediately went into instructor mode. "Okay, quick briefing before we start the fun. Let's talk about insect types. You already know from class that they have a common poison, right?" As he spoke, he casually thrust his spear forward, impaling a bee mid-flight. "Every swarm has a controller," he explained smoothly. "Neutralize it, and the rest of the hive becomes a cakewalk." Way ahead of him, Bak had already pinpointed the leader of the swarm and was in mid-attack before he even finished his sentence. "Not bad," Kim conceded, watching her take it down. "The leader bee gives off a unique mana wavelength, but it's tricky to pick out unless you have a lot of experience." While Guk and Bak were having their little chat, Woojun was taking a completely different approach. He was busy poking around the undergrowth, searching for ingredients. Success. Woojun found a fenestra plant. He couldn't believe the variety of ingredients here compared to the tower. He had to stock up on these dungeon exclusives. Meanwhile, Kim was still laying it on thick with Bak. "You know, if you put in a good word with the Jew family, I could make time for some one-on-one sessions." Kim's attention finally shifted to Woojun, who was still foraging like a squirrel. He couldn't help but wonder what on earth that kid had been up to since the moment they stepped inside. Kim, looking down his nose at him, tells Woojun to quit picking weeds and get a move on. Bake, convinced that academy kids are worthless, just watches silently. Meanwhile, Kim launches into a lecture stressing that the first rule of dungeoneering is to get a handle on the local environment and its inhabitants. Losing his patience, Kim barks at Woojun to stop gathering whatever and fall in line. He's like, "What's the point? This whole dungeon's already been mapped out, you know?" The little spirit gets all huffy, muttering about what a loudmouth moron Kim is. She gripes about how he could possibly interrupt the master's sacred ingredient gathering ritual. Kim, completely overshouting at Woojun, just tells Seha, "Let's go," and decides to leave the guy to his hobby. Just then, a recipe for killer bee honey popped into Woojun's head. And guess what? One of the key ingredients was assassin bee honeycomb jelly. Woojun muttered to himself that they'd been in here for 10 minutes already, and he hadn't spotted a single drop of that honeycomb jelly. He figured, okay, these assassin bees are massive, but they're still bees, right? Their instincts should be the same. Up ahead, Kim and Bake were already tangling with a swarm, and Kim shouted over to her, "Hey, don't get reckless, we can't have you getting hurt." While hunting for that honeycomb, Jelly Woojun realized that sticking with the group was just slowing down his foraging. He decided to peel off thinking, hey, those two are pros. It's not like they need me to hold their hands. They'd already taken down 15 of the things, but the swarm just kept coming wave after endless wave. Bake thought it was strange. Even after they took out the leader, the bees were still moving with perfect coordination. She shuddered, realizing that if Kim hadn't been there, they'd have been in some serious trouble. This place was way tougher than the reports suggested she realized, and if it was this hard for her, she couldn't imagine how Woojun was supposed to handle it. But when she glanced over her shoulder, Woojun was gone. She blinked, completely baffled. Where did he go? Kim started to say, in a situation like this, you have to... But Bake cut him off. He's gone. Kim just stared at her, confused. What? Woojun, she said, he's vanished. A wave of pure panic washed over Kim. He started yelling Woojun's name at the top of his lungs, desperately hoping for an answer. Kim was absolutely losing it, ranting about how that idiot Woojun was nothing but trouble. I never liked that guy. While we're out here fighting for our lives, he's off picking daisies. Suddenly, a deafening, thunder-like boom echoed through the dungeon. The blast was so powerful it rattled Kim's skull, making his vision swim. Bake clutched her head, realizing this was way different from the buzz of the assassin bees. Just then, a glowing red window materialized in the air above them. They both stared at it, a fresh wave of panic setting in as they tried to process what was happening. The alert flashed. The assassin bee queen, furious at the invasion of her hive, has appeared. Chuch. All at once, a massive wave of bees swarmed towards them in a perfectly coordinated assault. Meanwhile, Woojun was effortlessly slicing through any bees in his path, feeling pretty smug about his decision to go solo. Definitely the right call, he thought. Besides, that faint, sweet smell from earlier was getting stronger, hinting at some seriously high-quality ingredients just up ahead. As Woojun followed his nose, he spotted something interesting off the main path. The little spirit, struggling to keep up, called out, "Hey, where are you running off to? We're supposed to stay together, you know." Their path led them to the mouth of a huge hidden cave. "Whoa, how did we miss this?" the spirit girl asked, amazed. Woojun just shrugged, explaining it was probably tucked away in a really deep corner of the dungeon. Woojun considered himself pretty lucky. If he hadn't spent all that time honing his sense of smell specifically for honey, he'd have walked right past this place. No wonder nobody ever finds it. Stepping inside, he took a deep breath. "Yep," he said with a grin. "I think we just hit the jackpot. This is definitely the source of that smell." The spirit girl's eyes went wide at the sight of a gigantic glittering beehive. It's a honey mine, she declared. Woojun was just as floored by the massive honey crystals. "I've got to try a piece," he said, his mouth watering. But the second his fingers grazed one of the crystals, another warning alert blared to life right in front of them. Woojun read the alert. The queen bee was furious that someone had broken into her nest. Right on cue, a massive roar echoed from back outside the cave. Back with the others, Kim and Bake were scrambling for their lives. "I can't believe this went so sideways," Kim yelled. He was kicking himself for not bringing a tracker from the academy. All he could think was that if he lost a cadet in here, his chances of being acknowledged by the Jew family would go up in smoke. In a panic, Bake suggested, "We should split up. We can cover more ground, Sib." But the instructor immediately shot that down. "No, that's a terrible idea." Fending off another bee, the instructor yelled, "Think about it. If you go missing too, we're completely screwed." The instructor drove the point home. Splitting up now is just asking for disaster. Bake nodded, seeing his point. Suddenly, the instructor grabbed her arm. "Stop, hide, now." An eerie chittering sound echoed from up ahead. They held their breath, and then it appeared the queen bee, a massive C-rank boss. The instructor's blood ran cold. That's a dungeon boss," he stammered. His mind raced. What was a boss doing in a supposedly F-rank dungeon? It made no sense. He knew taking down a C-rank boss was impossible with a couple of rookie hunters. "We'd need at least 3 B-rankers for something like this," he thought desperately. Then a chilling realization hit him. The dungeon would seal itself shut 6 hours after the boss appeared. That left them with 2 choices: get out or die trying. But then a crazy thought cut through the panic. If he could somehow handle this, Chiguk's family might actually reward him. He took a shaky breath, trying to get a grip. He whispered, "It hasn't spotted us yet. We can still sneak away." But as the words left his mouth, the queen's massive head swiveled directly towards them. It knew. In the blink of an eye, the monstrous queen was right on top of them, unleashing a furious attack from above. "Get back!" the instructor yelled at Bake, his mind racing for a plan. "Use the trees for cover. Don't let it get a clear shot." As stingers rained down, he shouted, "I'll hold it off. You get to a safe distance and get ready." Chiguk could only watch in horror as the queen's attacks sliced through the massive trees like they were twigs. "This thing is way stronger than I thought," he grimaced, realizing he had no choice. It was time to use his ace in the whole spiral spear first form. With a defiant roar, he surged forward, his spear becoming a blur of lightning-fast, brutal strikes. After unleashing that furious assault, the instructor realized his best efforts only managed to put a tiny crack in the bee's tough hide. "Beck, run!" he shouted. She didn't want to leave him, but he was firm, telling her to get away while he held the monster off. But just then, Beck reappeared, declaring that her father always taught her to never run from a fight. With newfound resolve, she announced she was staying to battle it out. The instructor completely lost his cool, screaming that she had no idea what she was up against. He frantically warned her this was a C-rank boss and that she needed to brace herself. Right on cue, the bee lunged forward in a blindingly fast strike, which the instructor only just managed to evade. The second he dodged, a horrifying thought hit him. Beck wouldn't be fast enough. Undeterred, Beck charged straight at the giant bee, swinging her sword with all her might. Following her attack, Beck figured she could probably defend herself for a bit, but she hadn't made a difference at all. Her sword hadn't even left a scratch. "All right, new plan, we split up," the instructor yelled. "You be the distraction, and I'll land the final blow with my spiral spear." He knew they couldn't keep this up for long, so he planned to pour everything he had into one massive attack to shatter its defenses before he ran out of gas. With that, they both funneled all their mana into a final desperate gambit, knowing this was their one and only shot. Beck dashed forward, getting the bee's attention and expertly dodging its first lunge. The bee immediately took the bait and started hunting Beck down. But as it gave chase, she noticed something was different than before. The queen bee was summoning her minions. As the smaller bees swarmed, her Beck knew she just had to buy the instructor a little more time to power up. For a heart-stopping moment, Beck thought it was all over, but then the instructor unleashed his ultimate move, the second form of his spiral spear technique, blasting through the queen bee and anything else in his way with every last drop of his mana. The force of the blow sent the bee flying. Beck, who had collapsed onto the ground, looked up and asked weakly, Did we get it?" The instructor confidently replied that not even the dungeon's toughest monster could have taken a direct hit from his full-powered spiral spear. Just as Beck breathed a sigh of relief and suggested they get back to finding Wu Jun, the not-so-dead queen bee shot up from behind and ambushed her. Cheg, who had been watching from a distance, could only stare in horror. Before Beck could even turn around, the queen bee's enraged attack slammed into her, launching her through the air. She slammed violently into a tree trunk. Watching the scene unfold, Cheg felt a wave of despair wash over him as he witnessed the queen bee's pure, unadulterated fury. The instructor knew it was hopeless. There was nothing he could do. He'd used up every last bit of his strength on that final attack. He couldn't help but think that after all this, his stupid quest for a little recognition was going to get him killed in a place like this. And it was all that jerk Wu Jun's fault. He thought to himself that if it weren't for Wu Jun, they could have just found a hiding spot and waited for the dungeon exit to open. The instructor hoped that with the bee focused on him, maybe Beck could get in another hit. But then he saw it. The queen bee wasn't looking at him. It was looking somewhere else. And there, striding toward them like he was on a morning stroll, was Wu Jun. "You idiot," the instructor raged. "Where have you been all this time? You show up now, of all times, get out of here, run." As Wu Jun calmly readied his weapon, the instructor kept screaming for him to escape. "You'll be killed if you stay here." The queen bee screeched and charged Wu Jun with everything it had. But before the monster could even get close, Wu Jun's sword flashed once, cleaving it clean in two. The instructor's jaw hit the floor. Wu Jun didn't even look like he'd broken a sweat. Still lying on the ground, the instructor could only think, What just happened? He couldn't process what he was seeing. Wu Jun had sliced the queen bee in half. This guy he'd written off as a total nobody. The instructor started to wonder if maybe he'd overreacted just a little bit about the whole "we're all gonna die" thing. But after a moment's thought, he knew that wasn't it. The queen bee was absolutely strong enough to have killed him. And yet, Wu Jun had just deleted it. Thinking back on how he'd treated Wu Jun, the instructor suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. He was in deep trouble. He stumbled towards Wu Jun, trying to speak, but fear made him lose his composure as he blurted out, How did you do that?" Wu Jun, however, just gave him the silent treatment and started to walk away. It was then the instructor remembered Beck and hurried over to check on her. He found her still unconscious, but thankfully her injuries weren't life-threatening and her mana was circulating just fine. Cheg noticed Wu Jun was now holding a beehive and wondered if that's what he had been off looking for the whole time. He then spotted that Wu Jun had an inventory space and began questioning who could have gotten it for him. He figured if it was someone close, he really needed to dig up more info on this guy. The only explanation he thought was that Wu Jun must have cleared the 3rd floor of the tutorial tower. That was the only thing that could possibly make any of this make sense. The instructor was still trying to wrap his head around why Wu Jun would join a basic academy instead of a major guild. "What in the world are you?" he muttered to himself. Just then a powerful, unpleasant smell hit his nostrils, and he looked over to see what Wu Jun was up to. Walking closer, the instructor asked, "Hey, what are you doing?" He saw that Wu Jun had cooked something and warily questioned what on earth he was making. For a second, the instructor wondered if Wu Jun had used alchemy to whip up some kind of monster repellent item that worked by smell. He could see that Wu Jun had used pieces of the beehive, probably from the assassin bees, but he couldn't figure out why he'd thrown in a bunch of mushrooms that looked like common weeds. His best guess was that Wu Jun had been trying to create some kind of poison for the queen bee, but since she was already very, very dead, It didn't really seem necessary anymore. Then the unthinkable happened. Woojun held out a piece of his new concoction to Chaeg, who was left utterly speechless. A cold sweat broke out on his forehead as it dawned on him. Woojun wasn't brewing a potion, he was actually cooking, and he expected him to eat it. Chaeg was convinced this was some kind of grudge. Woojun was trying to make him sick as payback. Chaeg glanced at the bisected bee on the ground and figured a little tummy trouble was way better than being sliced in half. He nervously took a bite. "It's just food," he told himself. "It won't kill me." The moment the stuff touched his tongue, however, he was hit with a horrifying sensation that felt suspiciously like dying. He thought the taste was beyond awful, and the texture was a complete nightmare, like larvae wriggling around in his mouth. The cooked honeycomb was mushy, and the mushrooms were way too slimy. Chaeg was totally baffled by how bitter it was. With all that honeycomb, it should have been sweet. He could only wonder what other unholy ingredients Woojun had added to the mix. Still reeling from the culinary assault, Chaeg was sure Woojun had gotten his revenge. But before he could even process it, Woojun leaned in and asked, "So how is it?" With tears pouring down his face, Chuck manages to choke out that the food is actually delicious. But then a window suddenly materializes in front of him, announcing he's gained poison resistance, and his body is surging with energy. It dawns on Chuck that the meal boosted his poison resistance, and he figures it has to be because it was cooked with monster parts. He shoots a look at Woojun, wondering what in the world this guy's deal is. Meanwhile, Woojun is casually inspecting his dish's stats. He mentally notes that Chuck is sharper than he thought for recognizing the dish's true value. He even admits the guy has a pretty decent palate, much better than he'd given him credit for. As a flood of achievements pops up on his system screen, Woojun thinks to himself that adding the queen bee's gland was definitely the right move. Its tangy kick perfectly cut through the jelly's sweetness, giving it a much richer flavor. The little spirit girl takes a taste and announces that it's the most perfect meal, ever hitting all 5 of the basic human flavors. With his daily quest now complete, Woojun decides it's a good time to go gather some more ingredients. Just then, Beck, who had been knocked out cold, starts to stir and sits up. She groggily remembers getting ambushed by the queen bee and then everything going black. Seeing the defeated queen bee, she immediately assumes instructor Chuck took it down all by himself, making him seem even more incredible in her eyes. Chuck, who is still trying not to gag from the meal, notices Beck is awake. A brilliant idea pops into his head. If the food boosted his poison resistance, maybe he should give some to her. He offers her the plate, telling her to eat up and get her strength back, casually mentioning that Woojun was the chef. She gratefully accepts the food, and as she lifts a piece to her mouth, both Chuck and Woojun lean in, practically holding their breath, to see her reaction. After she swallows her first bite, Chuck asks how it tastes. Her eyes go wide with shock as she exclaims that it's unbelievably good and unlike anything she's ever had before. Chuck is now completely baffled, asking her to repeat what she just said. You see, when Beck was a little girl, she had a condition that made it nearly impossible for her to taste anything. Her father, desperate to help, even got a rare dungeon item from a friend that was supposed to bring back her sense of taste. He was so hopeful it would be the cure, but she still couldn't taste a single thing. Her father was crushed, and she could only apologize for not being able to taste it after all he'd done. She tried to comfort him, saying it was okay and that she could find other things in life to enjoy more than food. But now, after just one bite of Woojun's cooking, Beck says it's the first time she's ever experienced a sensation like this. She explains that in 20 years, nothing has ever worked, even though her father spent a small fortune on every possible solution. Chuck thinks Beck must be mistaken. Maybe her taste buds are just out of whack from the shock of the battle. But Beck insists her tongue is tingling from the amazing flavor. As Chuck's brain short-circuits from confusion, a crowd of Academy staff and reporters has formed outside the dungeon entrance. News is already spreading like wildfire about a surprise boss showing up in the dungeon, one that had been lying dormant for 5 whole years. A man pushes through the crowd towards the portal. It's Beck's father, the leader of the powerful Cheon Guild. He turns to his secretary and anxiously asks if his daughter is safe. The secretary confidently reassures him that being his daughter, she is undoubtedly going to be all right. A reporter shoves a microphone in the guild leader's face, asking how he feels about his daughter being trapped inside. The secretary instantly snaps at the journalist for asking such a classless question. The reporter, realizing he's crossed a major line, immediately switches off his recorder. Beck's father was livid at the reporter's nerve, calling him an insolent parasite. His secretary quickly urged him to calm down, reminding him that cameras were everywhere and he needed to protect the guild's public image. All of a sudden, the shimmering barrier over the portal flickered and died, signaling that someone was about to come out. The secretary and the guild leader locked their eyes on the portal. As Beck's father stepped forward, the entire team emerged: Beck, Sayla, Kim Chuck, and Woojun. All of them were safe and sound. The guild leader rushed forward and pulled his daughter into a tight hug, calling her return a miracle. The crowd was in awe that a C-rank boss was taken down by a B-rank hunter and 2 students. Then people spotted the item in Chuck's hand, recognizing it as the boss drop trophy. For context, weapons and artifacts fall into 5 categories: common, rare, unique, epic, and legendary. Chuck stared at the item, thinking about how you could probably count the number of people in all of Korea who own a legendary item on one hand. This thing was priceless. The crowd, however, was way too hyped to stay quiet. They mobbed Chuck, firing off questions about how he beat a C-rank boss and what the Assassin B was like up close. They kept asking him how he managed to keep the students safe, but he was just standing there, completely baffled as to why they were asking him all of this. A guy filming the whole thing commented that it looked like Chuck had single-handedly defeated the C-rank monster. Chuck, totally at a loss for words, just stayed quiet and shot a nervous glance at Woojin. Back at the academy, a high-ranking official had been stressing out about his job security because of the academy's recent lackluster performance. But when he saw the news that Chuck had defeated a C-rank monster, he assumed Chuck did it all himself and figured the instructor was far more capable than he'd appeared. After the dungeon was officially cleared, reports started flying in that several countries were interested in the C-rank boss. The internet was flooded with comments praising Chuck, which also massively boosted the reputation of the Jew family who broke the story. Chuck insisted that if it weren't for the students' help, he never would have made it out alive. While some netizens doubted his humble claim, the Academy official privately wondered if Chuck really could solo a C-rank boss at his level. He decided Chuck must have gotten incredibly lucky and congratulated himself on such a great hire. At that moment, he saw his office door swing open, revealing the 3 dungeon survivors now hailed as the Academy's newest heroes. The director warmly invited the trio to sit down, though Chuck looked pretty uncomfortable with all the praise being heaped on him. The director explained he'd called them in to sort out their bonuses and to get the full scoop on what went down in the dungeon. Chuck started off by repeating what he wrote in his report, that it would have been a total disaster without Woojin and Beck's help. Chuck tried to lay out the events, calmly starting from the beginning when he thought it was just going to be a normal dungeon run. So he launched into a play-by-play of what went down in there, while Woojin listened, looking bored out of his mind. Once the story wrapped up, the director had to admit the whole situation was pretty bizarre. Chegek went on to explain that he was only there to escort them for this one dungeon clear and that they really needed to brace themselves for more weirdness in the future. The director couldn't shake the feeling that he recognized the student named Woojun. He mentioned that Woojun's whole vibe felt familiar, and besides, he was the one who'd been pushing strange snacks on the other students. Then it hit him like a lightning bolt. Woojun was the sect leader. The director's jaw just about hit the floor, and someone immediately asked him what was wrong. Chigak, completely confused, asked, "Is there a problem?" The director, quickly pulling himself together, just said that was enough talk for one day and that they should all get some rest. On the inside, though, he was totally freaking out that the sect leader himself was actually there. As they headed out, Beck congratulated everyone on a job well done in the dungeon. Chegak suggested she get a hospital checkup just in case and let him know how it went. Then he told Woojun to go on ahead, saying he'd be right behind him. But just as Chegak was about to take off, Woojun stopped him with a, "Hey, hold on a second." Chegak's blood ran cold, thinking Woojun was about to blow his cover after all the news reports had already come out. He was honestly terrified that was about to happen. Considering Woojun hadn't said a word to the reporters and seemed totally uninterested in the boss loot, Chegak had absolutely no idea what he could possibly want to talk about. But all Woojun wanted to do was swap phone numbers, which left Chegak completely speechless. Woojun asked for his number, promising to bring him another tasty dish next time. Chegak was so caught off guard that he felt like all the strength had just drained out of him, and he just wandered off without a word. Meanwhile, the spirit girl was absolutely livid, calling him a reckless moron, and screaming that he'd just given away all the credit for clearing the dungeon. Woojun figured it's always the people desperate for the spotlight who get it first, and that's the last thing he wanted for himself. In the end, he'd managed to snag some new ingredients and recipes from the whole ordeal, so it was time to get back to the kitchen. Back in Woojun's classroom, his classmates were grilling him about the news reports. The big story was that Chegak had taken down a C-rank boss, and he'd credited the students with providing crucial support. Woojun's classmates swarmed him with questions like, "What was it like to see a C-rank monster in person?" And, "What were the other guys on your team like?" For the first time, Woojun reflected he'd actually completed his daily quests, all thanks to Bayek and Chegak. Now, he was just wondering who would get to be the taste tester for his food today. Professor Kim Jong-do strolled into the classroom, telling everyone, "All right, settle down, it's time for class to start." Keizo, in Sao Kwafetok Safir. The professor reminded them that they'd covered labyrinth traps in the last lesson, all while Wujun was still trying to decide who his culinary victim for the day would be. We'll review as we watch the practical exercises on the screen, the professor announced. First up, we have Hansung. During his practical, he looked completely lost, stumbling around in a thick cloud of smoke. The professor commented, "If this were a real dungeon, you'd be dead by now. You need to hold your breath and assess the situation." Hansung was clearly disappointed in himself, but the professor reassured him that getting frustrated is a perfectly normal part of the process. In a real fight, however, you'll never know what's coming, he warned. The professor started to worry about how his students would fare in the tournament that was just 2 months away. The Hunter Tournament is basically a big competition where everyone who clears the tutorial tower gets a chance to show off what they can do. Winning the tournament is a surefire way to get famous and score a spot in a major guild like Celestial Wings, but the Academy hadn't had a single noteworthy competitor in the last 10 years. The professor wondered if there was enough time to teach them anything that might give them an edge in the tournament as he continued to watch the training unfold. He noticed Bayek's performance was flawless and remarked that she was skilled enough to be sent out into the field already. It was honestly weird that she was still a student at the Academy. Seongjun also put on an amazing show which the professor called a perfect run. The professor noted that among the students there were definitely a few to keep an eye on. Next on the list was Wujun, and as his name was called, Seongjun's focus sharpened. He mused that Wujun was a complete mystery. Nobody knew his real abilities, his actual strength, or even why he bothered enrolling in the academy in the first place. Seongjun had been keeping tabs on Wujun the entire time, but the only thing the guy ever seemed to do was cook. He didn't really expect Wujun to suddenly reveal some hidden power, but just in case, he decided to watch him closely. Wujun proceeded to fail his test spectacularly, but he did it by intentionally pulling a lever to trigger a trap and fake his own death. He ended up with a score of 0 points, which was quite possibly the worst score in the entire class. The professor was so stunned by Wujun's abysmal performance that he was left completely speechless. The spirit girl, however, was enraged, shouting, "How dare you disrespect the chief, you arrogant fool!" Seongjun could tell Wujun had bombed the test on purpose, but he couldn't for the life of him figure out the reason why. Over in the academy cafeteria, a couple of students were complaining, with one of them grumbling, "If it wasn't for that bastard, we wouldn't even be in this mess." They kept whining about how some guy had blocked them from reaching the 3rd floor of the tower, but that they only passed because one of their own had bailed them out. One of the students from a group known as the 3 Useless Brothers declared he'd kill the guy the next time he saw him before going on a rant about how much he hated the professor's teaching methods. He brought up how the professor had told them they were lucky to have even cleared the tutorial tower with their skill set, and that everyone at the academy was supposed to be on the same level. But while scanning the cafeteria, one of the brothers spotted an exceptionally strange-looking meal on one of the tables. They were all wondering what kind of person would eat something so awful-looking when they realized it was Wujun, the very same guy they'd been bad-mouthing. The 3 brothers promptly went and sat right down at Wujun's table. They were practically shaking in their seats because they could tell from Wujun's expression that he remembered them perfectly, and they knew one wrong move would spell big trouble. The spirit girl asked Wujun, "Why are you eating so noisily, and do you even know these people?" He replied that they looked familiar, but he couldn't quite place them. Then an idea popped into his head. He decided to offer them a bite of his dish, a freshly prepared blue slime salad. One of the guys stared, seriously questioning if that concoction was actually food. Wujun chirped, "Not hungry," while the guy swore he saw the Grim Reaper giving him a thumbs up from behind Wujun's shoulder. Deciding to take his chances, the young man figured, "Well, it probably won't kill me, and it's definitely better than getting thrashed again." The moment he took a bite, he choked out that his stomach felt like it was staging a 5-alarm fire. He said it was like gargling mouthwash and then swallowing the entire mint plant it came from. They scrambled to find a single positive thing to say about the flavor, but ultimately admitted defeat and proceeded to violently redecorate the floor with their meal. Wujun just sighed, saying he pretty much expected that outcome, and that he had yet to find anyone with a palate refined enough for his creations. "So enjoying the meal?" Wujun asked cheerfully. One of the brothers opened his mouth to say something along the lines of "absolutely not," but then he saw that terrifying aura flicker around Wujun and quickly pivoted. "It's delicious," he stammered. A new professor, a guy named Lee Jung-shik, introduced himself to the class, letting everyone know he'd be covering the wonderful world of dungeon types. The professor laid down the law right away, missed more than 3 of his classes, and you're dropped. He also gave a friendly tip that listening to his lectures might actually help them pass the exam coming up in 3 weeks. A wave of skepticism washed over the students as the professor asked, "Any questions before we dive in?" The professor started talking about the Gauntlet Station, better known as the Honey Dungeon, but he made it clear it was super risky for rookie hunters. Woojun quietly noted that this lecture was hitting all the right notes for both his own goals and the systems. Next up, the professor moved on to the dungeons of Hangi, pointing out that the most well-known one is the Javali Wasteland, located just on the outskirts of Wongsmi. The spirit girl piped up, mentioning a pig there that's considered a total delicacy, but Woojun clarified that it was actually a wild boar. Woojun mused that wild boar meat can be pretty intense, flavor-wise, just as the professor declared the dungeon was a treasure trove for any E-rank hunter. The professor added that a ton of people have vanished in that dungeon, which is why students are totally banned from going in as long as the boars are active. The spirit girl sighed dramatically, complaining that those pigs looked way too delicious to pass up, which got Woojun thinking there had to be another way in. And just like that, the professor mentioned a loophole students could get in with the director's personal authorization, though he really didn't recommend it for anyone who wasn't seasoned. That was all Woojun needed to hear. His new plan was to find Guak Chayan. Cut to the academy director, who was currently staring at Woojun and wondering what in the world he was doing there. Woojun apologized for just showing up like that, but the director just waved a hand and told him to speak freely, asking what was on his mind. For a second, the director wondered if this was about the Assassin B dungeon, but he quickly dismissed it. The kid was just a cadet, and his test scores showed nothing special. Still, the longer he looked at Woojun, the more he saw a striking resemblance to the sect leader. Then it hit him a faint pulse of energy from the kid, the very same energy he remembered feeling from the sect leader himself. Absolutely stunned, he demanded to know where Woojun had possibly learned that martial art. So, Woojun explained that as a kid, he took a trip to Mount Bakdu, had a little accident, and got stuck. He said he stumbled into a cave, found a chest full of old books, and well, he got curious and started reading up on the martial arts inside. It all clicked into place for the director then. The sect leader must have left his book on Mount Bakdu, not Mount Tanhin. The director remembered the sect leader always complaining that his followers never figured it out. He just assumed the man was frustrated that no one was properly following his teachings. But it still made no sense. Why would the leader leave a book all the way out on Mount Bakdu? He decided that based on the kid's energy, the story was at least plausible. The director looked Woojun dead in the eye and said, "You're awfully confident. What made you so sure I'd recognize your aura the moment you showed it?" Woojun thought to himself, "Some things never change. The director is just as sharp as I remember." So he told the director the book also mentioned a figure known as the Blood Demon. Woojun added that the descriptions were incredibly specific, which led him to assume the director must have studied the same text. The director's voice turned icy. "And you think you can master those techniques just by reading Selks?" To which Woojun calmly replied, "It was a very descriptive book." The director considered this. The sect leader never did anything without a reason, so he probably wrote that book with painstaking detail. He realized he needed to know more. The director then asked, "So is that the only reason you came to see me today? Just to tell me this story?" Woojun didn't beat around the bush and asked for permission to enter the Javali Wasteland dungeon. The director told him that while it's normally forbidden, he'd make a special exception given the martial art Woojun knew. The director, clearly intrigued, asked Woojun to tell him more about the book. He then suggested they pick it up the next day since it was already pretty late. Woojun agreed that made sense, and as he was about to leave, the director asked who he planned on taking into the dungeon with him. Meanwhile, on a rooftop somewhere, Cheguk was giving a full report to his superior. The family leader, Ju Jang, heard him out and simply dismissed him. Just as Chiguk was heading out the door, the leader added, "You did well." Stunned, Chiguk managed a quick thank you before leaving. The second the door closed, he started fist-pumping in celebration, ecstatic that the family leader had actually praised him. As Cheguk gushed, the leader is famous for being a man of very few words who never gives out compliments. With the rest of the night free, Cheguk was all set to head to a bar for a celebratory drink, but right then his phone buzzed with a message from Woojun inviting him to the boar dungeon in the wasteland. Cheguk started nervously biting his nails, wondering what he was going to say. Then a memory sparked he'd seen something about that specific dungeon in one of the rule books. He flipped open the academy rule book, and sure enough, There it was. He remembered wanting to go there ages ago, but you couldn't get in without an official permission letter. Cheguk recalled another key detail. Dungeon entry requires a party of 3. Plus, Shia was still recovering from her injuries, so there was no way her family would give her the okay to go. A grin spread across Chiguk's face as he realized they were completely blocked by the regulations. There was no way they could go. He fired off a reply to Wu Jun explaining they'd need official permission, then thought to himself that he could finally go relax with that drink. Man, that guy's getting needy, he grumbled. But then a new message from Wu Jun popped up, almost immediately. Great, see you at 9 in the morning tomorrow. Attached to the message was a crystal-clear image of the director's official permission slip. The only hunters who typically ventured into that dungeon were lower-ranked folks who'd washed out from the front lines. They mainly went there to mine iron ore, a popular material, thanks to its high durability and great mana sensitivity. You know, most hunters in the C and D ranks, and even a good number of B rankers, are still using gear made from plain old iron ore. Because of that, mining iron is a pretty solid gig, which is why that place is always jam-packed with hunters looking to score some resources. Chiguk thought to himself that Wu Jun was clearly on another level skill-wise, so he couldn't figure out why he'd be here just for some minerals. Ever since they stepped into the dungeon, all he'd seen Wu Jun do was gather plants. Chiguk finally called out, "Hey Wu Jun, if you're looking for the iron mine, I'm pretty sure it's a little more to the southeast." He just assumed Wu Jun was there for the ore, but Wu Jun denied it, which only made Chiguk more confused about his purpose in this dungeon. Wu Jun then dropped the bomb that he didn't even know there was a mine here, stunning Chiguk that someone could be so clueless. Chiguk racked his brain trying to figure out what other reason Wu Jun could possibly have for being there if not for the iron. But as he was thinking, Wu Jun just vanished right in front of him. Chiguk immediately took off after him, noting that even though Wu Jun looked like he was just taking a stroll, he was moving way faster than him. After a long and exhausting sprint, Chiguk finally managed to catch up, still wondering to himself why the heck this guy was even here. Wu Jun bent down, picked up a cactus, and casually remarked, "This looks like you could eat it," while Chiguk just stared in disbelief as he saw him smiling at the spiky plant. After checking out the rest of the dungeon, Wu Jun pulled up his cooking interface and figured that if the Slime King recipe used slime parts, then this cactus probably had some unique properties too. Chiguk went up to Wu Jun to ask him yet again why he was in this dungeon, but Wu Jun just deflected by asking where he found the cactus. Completely exasperated, Chiguk snapped back that it came from the iron mine he'd told him about. His patience wearing thin, he reminded him, "I've been saying the whole time it's in the southeast direction." Chiguk was just about to really let him have it, but before he could even finish his thought, Wu Jun had already zipped off into the distance. Totally out of breath from the chase, Chiguk noticed that Wu Jun had just covered a 40-minute journey in only 5 minutes and looked like he hadn't even broken a sweat. When they got to the iron mine, Chiguk found himself wondering why someone with Wu Jun's talent would even bother with the Hunter Academy when he could get into any guild he wanted. Just before they could step into the mine, a miner came out complaining that some kid was in the way, obviously referring to Wu Jun. Then he added under his breath, "This is no place for idiots." He griped that it was bad enough dealing with the crowds of miners, but now he had to babysit a couple of kids. Getting more agitated with Wu Jun, he barked, "What are you doing? Get out of here." At that moment, the miner's buddy recognized Chiguk and wondered aloud why a guy rich enough to buy tons of iron ore would be hanging around a mine. Feeling the awkward tension, Chiguk shot Wu Jun a look that clearly said, "Care to explain this?" After a round of polite greetings, the miner brushed off the incident, saying it was no big deal and he was just laying out the mine's procedures for Chiguk's friend. The miner explained that he was just concerned because the mine is a dangerous place and he was being strict so that Chiguk's companion wouldn't get hurt. He declared it was simply his duty as a fellow human being and told Chiguk he should hurry up and clear the mine. Then, with a welcoming gesture, the miner invited them in while Chiguk thanked everyone for their hospitality. The miners started muttering that they already had a full crew for the day, and one of them whispered, "Are you sure we should be letting those two in?" In response, the head miner just said they'd probably come back with their pockets empty, having mined absolutely nothing. As Wu Jun and Chiguk ventured deeper, they debated which of the 3 tunnels to follow, ultimately agreeing that the further down they went, the higher the quality of minerals they'd likely find. Chiguk noted that while people seemed to get confrontational with Wu Jun pretty easily, their whole demeanor would flip the moment they recognized him. The spirit girl chimed in that this was probably the spot the miners mentioned, the one with all the high-quality minerals. But then something dawned on Chiguk, and he pointed out that they hadn't brought any mining tools. Wu Jun's solution was to just mine the ore with his sword, but Chiguk quickly shut him down, telling him they needed specialized equipment for that. While Chiguk was stressing that even the Academy's gear probably wouldn't be tough enough, Woo-jun just casually swung his sword and sheared off a massive piece of ore from the wall. He picked up the chunk he'd sliced off and declared this should be more than enough. Chiguk, witnessing the whole thing, was absolutely horrified and wondered how Woo-jun was cutting through solid rock like it was butter. Woo-jun announced that their work there was done, leaving Chiguk to seriously question if the guy next to him was even human. On their way out, the miners asked if they were finished already, to which Chiguk simply confirmed that their task was complete. The miners whispered behind their backs, saying they knew the two would leave with nothing and that you can't expect much from a B-rank hunter anyway. Back outside the cave, Chiguk was absolutely dumbfounded to see Woo-jun already in the middle of a cooking session. As Woo-jun sampled his cactus, he noted that the juice was all right, but the taste was a bit one-note and needed something more. That's when he came up with the idea of a slime sauce. He started by searing the sauce in a hot pan, then chopped up some peppers and onions and tossed them in. It was just as he suspected. Adding that spicy kick made the dish a whole lot tastier. Woo-jun's cooking system lit up with notifications he'd gained experience, created a dish of extreme quality, and it was now imbued with dungeon energy. That last phrase, dungeon energy, really piqued his interest. The spirit girl popped back into view, cheering that the chef had managed to create a dish that surpassed A-grade quality, and said she always knew he had it in him. She went on to explain that dishes rated higher than A-grade are infused with dungeon energy, granting special buffs to whoever eats them. Woo-jun confirmed what the spirit said was true, seeing that he'd just received a strength-boosting effect that would last for 24 hours. He then decided he should offer some of his cactus dish to the instructor. The instructor gave Woo-jun's dish a look of pure disgust, questioning if it was even edible. But then he remembered the last thing Woo-jun cooked and conceded that this dish at least looked a bit more conventional. Still wary of taking a bite, the instructor wondered if you could actually grill and eat a cactus. But since Woo-jun had already tried it and seemed fine, he figured it was probably safe. The instant he put a piece in his mouth, however, he felt a powerful urge to throw up, questioning what on earth that flavor was supposed to be. While fighting off the revulsion, he vaguely recalled hearing that cactus was supposed to have a fresh, spicy flavor, but this one's texture just reminded him of an overripe avocado. As he forced himself to chew, the instructor complained that with every bite, it felt like his mouth was being filled with a ladle of cooking oil. Out of nowhere, Woo-jun held out a jar of sauce, suggesting he mix it into the food. Cheguk, ever the optimist, was convinced this magical concoction would make everything taste amazing. The instant it hit his tongue, however, an inferno of spice erupted in his mouth. After a series of what could only be described as near-death convulsions, the instructor collapsed, gasping that it was delicious, while Woo-jun beamed, delighted his cuisine was so appreciated. While sprawled out on the ground, contemplating his life choices, Cheguk saw a notification pop up, letting him know his strength had jumped by 3 points for the next 24 hours. He was floored, realizing his stats had shot up exactly like they did the last time he'd sampled Woo-jun's cooking. Except this time, the buff was sticking around for a full 24 hours. It finally dawned on Cheguk that Woo-jun wasn't just messing with him. This dungeon food was a legitimate power-up, not just a desperate meal. But just then, he felt the ground start to shake and figured it was an earthquake. A moment later, the miners started yelling for everyone to make a run for it. A herd of wild boars was on its way. Cheguk readied himself for a fight, musing that a single boar isn't much of a challenge. The real problem is they always roll deep in massive herds. As the stampede got closer, Cheguk thought that if he were by himself, he'd have just gotten out of the way. But with Woo-jun around, he felt a surge of confidence and charged straight in, spear leading the way. He sliced through the boars with ease, but couldn't help noticing their numbers were barely shrinking. He grumbled to himself that if Woo-jun would just group them up, this would be a lot faster. But when Cheguk turned to get Woo-jun's attention and tell him to start pulling his weight, the guy was just gone. Cheguk's first thought was that Woo-jun must have gotten swept away by the boars, but then a chilling voice whispered right in his ear, critiquing the unnecessarily dramatic flourishes in his spear technique. Whipping his head around to find who was talking, Cheguk spotted Woo-jun standing casually on top of a nearby mountain. He was completely baffled as to how he got up there so fast. Woo-jun's voice echoed down, saying, "They're just beasts, you know. Swinging your spear like you're in a duel with a human is pointless." Cheguk was still trying to figure out how he could even hear him from that distance. As Woo-jun was telling him to focus, a boar snuck up from behind ready to attack, but Cheguk dispatched it with an almost casual flick of his wrist. Watching from above, Woo-jun thought to himself that Cheguk was the only soul on the planet who actually enjoyed his cooking. Really giving him a few pointers was the least he could do. Woo-jun decided then and there that he would bless Cheguk with priceless lessons that no amount of money could ever buy. Down on the battlefield, however, Cheguk was getting seriously annoyed that this guy who bailed on the fight was suddenly dropping the formalities and giving him unsolicited advice. The head miner watching the battle unfold commented that, as usual, everyone had bolted for the mine. He figured if Kim Cheguk could handle the boars, they'd have all the iron they could want. But he also noticed that Cheguk wasn't quite living up to his legendary reputation and was a bit puzzled by his performance. The miner also made a mental note that Cheguk's young apprentice had taken off pretty early on. Woo-jun chimed in again, correcting Cheguk by pointing out his center of gravity was way off and that he was burning through his stamina. Cheguk was getting more irritated by the second with this guy's non-stop commentary from the cheap seats. Woo-jun watched Cheguk's every move with a critical eye, telling him to use his body more efficiently since he was wasting way too much effort on each swing. As he observed more intently, Woo-jun realized Cheguk's style was all for show. It looked impressive but lacked any real precision. Cheguk's fury mounted as he continued to carve boars in half. Woo-jun piped up once more, scolding him for his excessive movement and for pouring too much emotion into his weapon. By now, Cheguk was totally gassed from the fight, and a quick glance around confirmed he was completely swamped by boars. He muttered that there was no end to them, and while he wasn't hurt, he wasn't sure how much longer he could last. From his vantage point, Woo-jun had sized up the situation and concluded that Cheguk was a bit of a slow learner. Woo-jun finally drew his sword and unleashed a strike from the mountaintop. Cheguk felt an incredible surge of power, and before he could even register what was happening, a devastating attack wave ripped across the field, obliterating scores of boars. Cheguk was absolutely stunned that Woo-jun could launch a sword attack from that kind of distance. He immediately guessed Woo-jun had to be an S rank. Before he could even finish the thought, Woo-jun was standing right beside him, confirming that his own abilities didn't even come close. The miner who was watching remarked that 1 minute Cheguk was struggling and the next something incredible just happened. He was convinced that Cheguk had somehow annihilated all the boars in a single moment. The miner thought to himself that he'd worked alongside plenty of B-rank hunters, but none of them were even in the same league as Cheguk. He was so far beyond them that the miner could only assume one thing: Cheguk had been sandbagging this whole time. Abruptly, a system window flashed before all three of them, announcing that the boss was enraged by the slaughter of its herd. And just like that, it spawned in, and Cheguk and Woo-jun were face-to-face with the Wasteland Dungeon's main event. To make its anger known, the boss let out a deafening roar that filled the air with pure dread. The moment Cheguk saw it prepare to charge, he shouted for Woo-jun to get behind him. As Cheguk braced himself, he declared, "I'm not going down that easily this time." But just as the massive boar was about to connect, Woo-jun simply stepped forward and dropped it with a single effortless blow. Cheguk's jaw hit the floor as he watched, completely unable to process what had just transpired. By the time he looked again, Woo-jun was already sheathing his sword, and Cheguk remarked that he never even saw him draw it in the first place. The hidden miner muttered that he didn't even see the spear move, and wondered if that was physically possible. He then came to the only logical conclusion: Kim Cheguk had to be a literal god. The miner figured that Cheguk and his apprentice must train in secret to keep their true power under wraps, and he became terrified they might silence him for having seen it all. With that thought, he became 100% convinced he was a dead man, since people went missing in dungeons all the time. The miner kept watching, thinking that Cheguk seemed like a good guy for trying to shield his disciple, but he wondered if that kindness extended to anyone else. Deciding not to stick around to find out, the miner scurried back into the safety of the cave. Woo-jun noticed the miner's presence had disappeared and commented that it was too bad, as he was about to offer him some of his cooking. Woo-jun then mentioned that unlike that skilled assassin they fought before, this dungeon boss didn't drop a single piece of equipment. The spirit girl was over the moon because she just scored some top-quality meat from the boss. Woo-jun declared that a true chef knows how to feed the hungry, then noted that the dungeon was set to close in 6 hours, reminding them they couldn't afford to waste any time. Cheguk sighed, lamenting that thanks to the lousy monster drops they were leaving this dungeon completely broke. Cheguk guessed that Woo-jun would probably use the monster's cores for cooking again. He speculated that they might give him another special buff like last time, but then his face fell as he remembered he'd have to eat more of that horrifically disgusting food. Cheguk couldn't stop thinking about how the boss's internal core was worth a cool 300 million. He was torn should he endure a 300 million won meal of pure nastiness or just make a quiet getaway. The second option sounded way better, but financially it was a terrible move. So Cheguk turned to Woo-jun and asked, "Hey, shouldn't we just hang out until the dungeon exit opens up?" Woo-jun, however, was completely zoned out, already planning what masterpiece he could create from the boss's carcass as he started carving it up. Cheguk had to admit the guy's knife work was something straight out of a cooking anime, which of course made Cheguk wonder just what kind of culinary monstrosity Woo-jun was about to unleash this time. Woojun finally noticed Cheguk staring and asked, getting excited to see what I'm making. With tears welling up in his eyes, Cheguk choked out a sarcastic, "Oh yeah, totally." The instructor chimed in, asking Woojun, "You're seriously going to cook right now?" Cheguk muttered that he was still trying to digest the grilled cactus from earlier. Woojun just pointed out, "Well, we've got another 6 hours to kill in here." Cheguk sighed, confirming it was because the boss battle had triggered a lockdown. "Perfect," Woojun declared. "We'll be here right through dinner." Cheguk had already skipped lunch while griping about the dungeon's rules. The spirit girl then floated over, asking Woojun if he was done butchering the meat and complimenting his slick knife skills. Woojun asked the spirit girl for a frying pan, explaining he wanted to grill a piece to taste test it and make sure it was cooked right before serving. After searing the meat, he popped a piece in his mouth, curious about the flavor. As he chewed, Woojun remarked that, just as you'd expect from dungeon ingredients, the texture was really something else. It was surprisingly crunchy, almost like he was biting into a piece of fruit. Besides the bizarre crunch, Woojun didn't find the meat all that special, though he did appreciate its wild, gamey scent. After a moment of thought, Woojun announced it would be perfect for a classic sweet and sour pork dish. The spirit girl was floored by the idea of him making that here. She was sure he could pull it off, but had no idea how he was going to manage it in a dungeon. "You're about to find out," Woojun told her, asking for a steamer next. He explained that the key was to layer the cactus with the pork in the steamer, before adding some special ingredients from his inventory. Cheguk watched Woojun toss in star anise and peppers and figured he really was attempting to make sweet and sour pork. For a brief, hopeful moment, Cheguk thought that since Woojun was using actual meat this time, there was no way he could mess it up right, even for him. That hope shattered the instant he saw Woojun add cactus to the mix. "I should have known better," Cheguk thought, concluding that this was doomed to be another failure. Woojun decided that just steaming everything together wasn't enough. He had a brainwave he'd grill both the meat and cactus over iron ore, convinced this would double the flavor. "That smell is just awful." Cheguk gagged, wondering how frying oil could possibly smell like rotten avocados. Woojun meanwhile commented that after searing the meat, he'd toss in soy sauce and rice wine to cook it down. The spirit girl suddenly started cheering, shouting that she couldn't take it anymore now that such a delicious aroma was filling the air. Woojun calmly replied that it would be at least 3 more hours. The spirit girl cried out that having to smell something so heavenly for that long was pure torture. Watching from the sidelines, Cheguk saw how much fun Woojun was having and decided he'd just take a nap while the guy played chef. A while later, the dish was finally done. Woojun decided to give it a taste test. After a bite, he noted that even with the boss's internal core mixed in, the flavor was a lot milder than he'd anticipated. To fix this, he decided to kick things up a notch with a dash of queen bee venom. "Almost there," he said cheerfully while Cheguk, deep in sleep, was having a nightmare that probably starred Woojun. The spirit girl noticed Cheguk twitching in his sleep. "What's he dreaming about?" she wondered. "He looks absolutely terrified." "It's almost ready," Woojun announced. "Just have to wait for the perfect moment to pull the pork." Relying on his instincts, Woojun suddenly decided the time was now whipping the lid off the pot and releasing a giant plume of steam. And there it was in all its glory, the finished pork dish. System windows popped up detailing his creation and revealing it was A+ quality. Just then, Cheguk shot up screaming, "You were trying to make me eat a beehive," as tears streamed down his face. Cheguk blinked, realizing where he was, and thanked his lucky stars it was all just a dream. Man, he thought if that had been real, he'd be in serious trouble. But then he saw the dish Woojun had made. He slapped himself hard across the face, hoping to wake up, but the stinging pain confirmed the horrifying truth. This was reality. "Come on, eat up while it's hot," Woojun offered with a smile. Cheguk just thought to himself, "I am never ever escaping this guy." Cheguk tried to compose himself, reasoning that even though the food always tasted horrific, it did boost his stats, and this time should be no different. He remembered the last monstrosity Woojun served him, and had to admit this one at least looked a lot more appetizing. From where Cheguk was sitting, Woojun was radiating a menacing aura, and he was pretty sure if he didn't eat, he'd be the next thing on the menu. He told himself one more time that since it was actual meat, it had to be better than eating a cactus. But the second his fork touched the meat, he felt a distinct crunch and knew something was terribly wrong. He wondered why a sweet and sour pork dish, which is supposed to be tender, was making a crunchy sound. He decided there was no time to think about it. He had to eat if he wanted to live. With a sense of doom, he shoved a piece into his mouth, praying for another one of those special effects. Instead, he was immediately assaulted by an overwhelming saltiness. Cheguk thought the meat was saltier than the entire ocean and couldn't understand how it was so intense when Woojin had clearly added pepper. And it feels like I've got a herd of wild boars stampeding in my mouth. Cheguk thought, questioning how it could be both crunchy and have the texture of spoiled jello. He decided this meal was a curse, the final curse of the Wasteland Dungeon. Just when all hope seemed lost, a notification window appeared for Cheguk, informing him that he'd consumed the boss's internal core and his overall health had increased by 4 levels. A second notification followed, stating that by eating the boss's meat, his resistance had also seen a slight increase. Cheguk was floored by the stat jump. He knew that for a rank B hunter, going up even 1 level was incredibly difficult, and building up resistance took a ton of effort and an insane amount of cash. Cheguk realized that if word got out about this, hunters from all over would be flocking to this place. He did admit, though, that everyone has a breaking point because the flavor is so utterly vile that death starts to look like a pretty good option. Outside the Wasteland Dungeon, a whole crowd had formed. One of them piped up, "See, sticking with Cheguk was the smartest move we could have made." The young guy explained that for 3 years he'd been walking on eggshells with absolutely zero luck. But things turned around in his reporting career after he snagged an exclusive on the Killer Bee Dungeon, and that's when he finally started making a name for himself. A lot of people were chiming in that Cheguk was something else for running into 2 dungeon bosses, and they all wondered if he could actually take down this one too. Then, without warning, the portal shimmered, and someone stumbled through. To everyone's shock, it was one of the miners yelling that he was sure he was a goner in there. The moment the miner stepped out, he was completely floored by the sheer number of people waiting for him. The reporter's eyes went wide when he saw the miner, and he scrambled to remember the guy's name. After he called it out, the startled miner just asked how on earth he knew who he was. A pack of thrilled reporters immediately swarmed the miner, peppering him with questions about whether he'd spotted King Cheguk and what exactly went down inside. After getting hammered with questions about Cheguk's well-being, he put his hands up and told everyone to chill out, promising he would tell them everything he saw in there. He then launched into it, saying he definitely saw King Cheguk and dropped a bomb. The guy was an A-rank hunter who had been keeping his real power under wraps. Right then, King Cheguk and Woojin stepped out of the portal, and Cheguk just blinked, wondering what the big welcome party was for. All of a sudden, news stories about King Cheguk were blowing up all over the web. Some users were completely losing their minds, cheering that their country finally had an S-rank hunter and that Cheguk was an absolute beast. Every headline was more over the top than the last, shouting that Cheguk had cleared the boar dungeon all by himself and was in the top 1% of all hunters. The reporters were still buzzing, firing questions at Cheguk about what went on in the dungeon, and if he had a heads up that a high-level boss was coming. Cheguk just asked them to cool their jets and go one at a time, promising he'd answer every single question. He then followed up with an apology, explaining that some questions were just a bit tough to get into right at that moment. Cheguk then started giving the reporters the rundown of what happened. Woojin watched in awe. Cheguk was a total pro at this, dodging their questions like it was an art form. Later, Cheguk was mentally giving himself a high five for having sidestepped all those inquiries so expertly. He walked right past the clueless interviewers, thinking that even if all this crazy talk was true, there was no way he'd admit it here. More questions flew at Cheguk, but he just said he understood why everyone was so worked up. Cheguk made sure to point out that during the raid, he and his partner ran into a snag, but Woojin showed some amazing control and was a huge help to them. He tacked on that without Woojin clearing the dungeon would have been a whole lot tougher. Cheguk mentioned that as a temporary instructor, he had to be responsible for his students, but that last part seemed to fly right over the reporters' heads. Then Cheguk announced that to keep Woojin out of the spotlight, he was cutting the interviews short. Now, speaking of director Lee Chaeyon, his life in the demonic sect was really defined by 3 major turning points. The first was the day he officially joined the demonic sect. The second was when he became a direct subordinate to the sect's celestial demon. The sheer amount of experience he gained made him incredibly strong. The former celestial demon once asked him, "Don't you ever think this dish could be better?" But the celestial demon just kept talking, suggesting that a stronger smell would make it taste way better. And with that, the former celestial demon dove into a cooking frenzy with the mysterious concoction. Chaeyon was genuinely impressed. Watching the man blend martial arts into his daily routine was pretty captivating. The celestial demon finished his creation, announcing that he figured it would be even better with a little cilantro and some sea squirts. Chaeyon took a bite and noted that the peppers and cilantro were at war with each other, while the sea squirts were trying to balance everything out, leaving him to puzzle over the bizarre taste. Then the former celestial demon asked him how it was. Cheon's mind raced. He couldn't possibly let the guy down, not after he made the dish, especially for him. So he plastered on a huge grin and said it was absolutely perfect, all while thinking to himself that he just had to keep smiling to avoid crushing the man's spirit. But after Cheon told him his food was great, everything took a turn and the celestial demon's cooking sprees never ended. Over the years, the destructive potential of his dishes only grew, spawning even bolder creations like tofu that smelled like pork. The celestial demon was constantly hunting Cheon down to taste test his new recipes, and Cheon hated every second of it. Then one day, Cheon finally decided he was going to tell the celestial demon the truth, that his food was awful and he really needed to stop. But while Cheon was building up his courage, the celestial demon found him, proudly telling him he had whipped up a special dish of sour pork with seafood just for him. At that point, however, Cheon was completely done with all the terrible food and the constant moral struggle. One day, Cheon was just thinking, and it hit him the sect leader's cooking had officially surpassed the lethality of the Tang clan's legendary poisons. If he kept eating it, he was going to suffer a serious drop in his IQ. He thought to himself that he was indebted to the celestial demon, but he had zero interest in leading the sect. It really felt like the universe was just messing with him at this point. All of a sudden, an idea struck Cheon and he began to open a massive gate. He had decided to just ditch his physical body, become an immortal, and transcend this whole mess. He was absolutely certain that the realm of immortals he'd been aiming for was right there in front of him. But before that could happen, some divine being popped up and called Cheon a total scoundrel, telling him there was no way he'd ever become an immortal after taking so many lives. The divine being promptly kicked Cheon out of the divine realm for good. The next thing he knew, he was reborn on Earth as a baby with his new mom trying to feed him. Still, there was one thing he really appreciated about this new world. He declared that the sushi here was absolutely top-notch. As he savored it, his thoughts drifted back to the sect leader. Cheon considered that there was no way Woojun could have taken down a rank C boss all on his own. Then again, Woojun had inherited the sect master's own martial arts. So if he'd really honed those skills, it was possible he could pull it off. Cheon was puzzled as to why Woojun was hiding his true power, but he figured he'd just ask him about it when he dropped by his office. Just then, Woojun appeared inside the director's office, giving him a deep bow. The director told Woojun to skip the formal stuff and get comfortable since they were both alumni. The director, looking as chill as ever, asked Woojun why he was so wound up and told him to just talk normally, insisting he was a pretty laid-back guy. Cheon couldn't help but think that kids these days were supposed to open up when an adult was friendly, but man, they really had no manners. Cheon noted that Woojun didn't seem the least bit curious, that they were old classmates, figuring it must be hard for the kid to chat with someone older, even if he was dying to know. So he just plowed ahead, saying he'd lay it all out for him, starting with the martial arts he'd learned over the years. He explained that his martial art was called the Blood Demon Arts, founded by a guy known as the Blood Demon, while the style Woojun used was created by someone called the Celestial Demon. Cheon said, the Celestial Demon was the kind of guy who had unshakable ideals and the power to actually make them a reality. By sheer coincidence, the Blood Demon met the Celestial Demon, was totally floored by his vision, and offered to become his right-hand man. Cheon explained that while the Celestial Demon's path was cool, the Blood Demon was more suited for it all, while Woojun was clearly tuning out. With a big laugh, Cheon added that since they were fellow alumni, Woojun shouldn't even bother trying to compete. Cheon remarked that you could practically get enlightened just watching the Celestial Demon's techniques, yet all the disciples still preferred the blood arts. Woojun, completely drained from just listening, thought to himself that this guy's claims were so off the wall, they were almost impossible to take seriously. Then Cheon finally got to the point revealing that getting older had only made him more curious, and he'd really love to learn the Celestial Demon arts Woojun had perfected. Cheon proposed a trade. He'd teach Woojun the Blood Demon arts for his secrets, but he couldn't shake the feeling he was getting the raw end of the deal. In that instant, Woojun's playful attitude vanished. He flatly stated that he saw through the whole ridiculous story and knew Cheon's real goal was the Celestial Demon's martial arts. Woojun admitted he understood the appeal since his martial arts were something practically everyone in the Central Plains would kill to get their hands on. But you're just lying to yourself and dressing up the past, he said. It's a habit you seriously need to break. Woojun then rose to his feet, a dark aura pouring off him that made the air in the room feel heavy. Cheon was completely terrified by the immense power radiating from him. Following that display, Woojun revealed he knew the director's true identity was Dui, which made the director start trembling in fear as he recognized the sect leader. Woojun started to needle Cheon, saying the blood demon arts were way stronger than the celestial arts, even though he didn't believe a word of it himself. Cheon immediately started stammering apologies, insisting he never really thought that way and that Woojun had to believe him. But Woojun just pressed him, saying that was exactly what he'd said. Still, Cheon kept apologizing, explaining he'd been tempted by a rumor about a book that some fool had tricked him and that he was ready for any punishment. Cheon started desperately pleading for the sect master's forgiveness. Woojun finally eased up and said that was enough. Since Cheon admitted his mistake, he'd let it slide just this once. Cheon thanked him, but Woojun added that his earlier behavior had been way out of line. Now he needed to cool off. Woojun told Cheon to take a seat so they could wrap up their chat. Woojun mentioned that the blood demon had always claimed he was going to ascend and just disappear, and the director confirmed that the immortals had basically rejected him because of bad luck. Woojun remembered the celestial gods had pinned 30% of his sins on the demonic cult, and the rest on crimes against cooking. He got so lost in the memory that Cheon had to snap him out of it. He then had to wonder what kind of bizarre memory that was. Woojun said again that if Cheon hadn't lied, he never would have had to blow his cover. Once more, Cheon apologized, saying his greed got the better of him. Woojun repeated that he was dropping it and didn't want to hear another word about it. Cheon noticed Woojun seemed really happy with the world as it was, and got a sinking feeling he might start dreaming of a world ruled by demons again. After that, Woojun asked Cheon if he was free to grab a bite to eat, adding that he'd cook for him. Cheon was so utterly shocked to hear Woojun offer to cook that he was left completely speechless. Cheon argued that the master's cooking was only for those who'd made great contributions to the sect, and given his recent screw-up, he definitely didn't deserve any. But Woojun just replied that those rules only applied back in the sect. They were at the Hunter Academy now. Then Woojun enthusiastically declared that his cooking skills had gotten way better since then and that Cheon really had something to look forward to. Cheon moaned internally that he had tried to ascend to godhood just to get away from Woojun's cooking, but now he was stuck eating it again. He wished his old pals Guangma or Cha were with him, so he wouldn't have to go through this by himself. But he quickly remembered that everyone from the sect he used to eat with was long gone, not even the elders who'd taken over his house. Then it dawned on him he was going to have to face the sect master's cooking all on his own. He figured that even if the master's cooking had improved, it probably just meant his food had gotten even weirder and more horrifying. Suddenly, a mysterious figure informed his servant that the killer bee and boar bosses they were hunting had been taken out by some bee ranker named Kim Ji-hyuk. He then decided to pose a question to his servant Park Sunjin. He asked if the kid really thought Kim Ji-hyuk was skilled enough to handle all that. The boy answered that he didn't think Kim Ji-hyuk had it in him, admitting he had some raw talent, but was still just a B ranker at best. The man noted that Kim Ji-hyuk had only hit B rank with help from the Jo clan and was nowhere near strong enough to get noticed by the organization's top brass. The boy added that even if Kim Ji-hyuk somehow got lucky and beat the boss, he couldn't have had the intel to track it down in the first place. The man then ordered Kim Ji-hyuk to be put on the watch list, instructing them to keep tabs on him and to report any new developments immediately. He said that this was all part of the Eclipse's grand plan and then abruptly vanished from the room. The boy who was left in the room was tense and sweating as he added Kim Ji-hyuk to his watch list. Over at the Hunter Academy, Baek was whining that because of the killer bee mess, she was basically grounded. Her dad said it was too dangerous out, but she thought he was being completely extra about it. Turns out the real reason she even enrolled in the academy was to get away from her helicopter dad. Apparently, the guy would go into a full-blown panic over the smallest injury, calling every hunter doctor he could find. Even a tiny scrape on her knee was enough to make him completely lose it. In his mind, a little scratch like that basically meant she was on house arrest for the rest of the afternoon to recover. Later, Baek was scrolling through the news when an article about Kim Chae-guk caught her eye. It claimed that Chae-guk was secretly an A-rank hunter. It then dawned on her that Chae-guk and Woo-jin had spent the weekend running low-level dungeons together, and she was pretty annoyed that they hadn't said a thing to her. What really bugged her was that they were supposed to be a team, but neither of them bothered to even ask her along. She just couldn't figure out why Chae-guk was so fixated on Woo-jin, who just seemed like a hard-working but pretty average hunter to her. She wondered if Woo-jin was actually his apprentice or if the old man was just obsessed with his cooking. Thinking about it, she figured it was totally possible that Chae-guk tasted his food, had his mind blown, and had been hunting him down ever since. Baek remembered how incredible that meal was. It was the one that single-handedly rebooted her sense of taste. She could still recall the feeling like a little jolt of electricity zapping her tongue. People always talk about delicious food, and Beck had tried just about everything, but she'd never felt anything even close to that again. That settled it. She had to find out for sure. She was determined to track down Woo Jin and try his cooking one more time. Whether she wanted to admit it or not, there was something truly special about him. In class, Beck found herself watching Woo Jin while the professor explained how the deeper you go into dungeons, the more your mana grows. She saw that Woo Jin was completely absorbed in the lecture. A second later, she glanced at the time and realized she was 20 minutes late for lunch, so she bolted. She recalled that ever since getting back from the Killer Bee dungeon, she'd put all her personal investigations on the back burner. So she made finding Woo Jin during lunch her top priority. Over in the cafeteria, students were whispering that Chaeguk was actually there with Woo Jin, which meant the rumors were true. Still, no one could understand why they were together. Some students figured that if Woo Jin really was Kim Chaeguk's disciple, it wasn't all that shocking to see them sharing a table. But given Kim Chaeguk's personality, it was still pretty weird. As he was reluctantly choking down Woo Jin's food, he was internally screaming about how awful it was. He thought the steak was bitter spicy and was making his stomach churn. At the same time, students near their table were muttering that you should give it a wide berth because of the terrible smell. Finally, Beck spotted Woo Jin at his lunch table. He greeted her with a smile and asked if she was feeling better. "I am, thank you," she replied. Wasting no time, Woo Jin said he was glad to hear it and offered her a bite of his food, which she happily took. Chaeguk, who was already at his limit, just stared in disbelief, seriously questioning if Beck had lost her mind for willingly eating Woo Jin's creation. As she brought the fork to her mouth, all the surrounding students held their breath. The second she tasted it, she practically melted into a state of pure bliss, declaring, "It's just as amazing as I remembered." Woo Jin's food was simply divine. Chaeguk's jaw dropped in utter shock, completely unable to compute what was happening. Bayek made a note pointing out that the flavor was a bit different this time around. To her, it felt a little weaker, or to put it better, a bit milder. She mentioned that the food back in the Killer Bee dungeon had felt like it was zapping her tongue, while this felt more like a pig was gently tapping her with its hoof. She did notice, however, that Chaeguk seemed to be loving it, so she just figured it wasn't bad for everyone. It was all just a matter of personal preference. Baek stood up, thanked Woo Jin for the food, and asked if he might cook for her again. He immediately said he would. The other students watched the whole exchange, wondering if his cooking was actually good, since the table looked like the aftermath of a chemical spill. But then they saw the famous Kim Chaeguk scarfing down the food and figured it couldn't possibly be that bad. After a moment, the spirit girl appeared, cheerfully pointing out that more people were appreciating his culinary skills. Woo Jin replied that hearing that made him truly happy. He recalled that back in his old life, lots of people enjoyed his food, but not a single one ever had the courage to ask for it a second time. He remembered how sad it was that even as they savored his cooking, they were all too petrified of the celestial demon to even whisper a word of praise. He was just glad that things weren't like that in this world. But then a different presence caught his attention. Woo Jin noted that whoever it was, they were a master at concealing their aura. If he had been anyone else, he never would have sensed it. Over in the gymnasium, Seongjun was training with a wooden sword. Woo Jin was amazed to see him battling against virtual opponents. As he watched more closely, Woo Jin saw that Seongjun was taking on enemies, wielding spears, swords, bows, and all sorts of other weapons. There were even simulated beasts and monsters in the mix. Woo Jin could only compare it to a soldier preparing for war, fighting off countless foes all by himself. Woo Jin reflected that in the tutorial tower, he'd only seen the tail end of his battle, but watching him go all out now, everything started to click into place. He finally grasped that Seongjun's martial arts skills were on an entirely different level. Feeling like it would be impolite to watch someone's private training for too long, Woo Jin decided to head for the dorm. But right before he left, the spirit girl told him to wait and check out something interesting she'd found. The spirit girl was pointing to a flyer for the Hunter tournament. Woo Jin felt like he'd heard about the tournament somewhere before, but he couldn't recall where. He just chalked it up to something a professor probably mentioned in class. The Hunter tournament was an annual event held exclusively for new hunters with under a year of experience. It was a huge hit with the public because the format was different every time. Hunters who really shined in the tournament got a chance to make a name for themselves and boost their market value. The ultimate prize was a spot in the World Hunter Tournament. In Korea, only the top 4 participants earned that honor. Woo Jin admitted the rewards were impressive, but he had zero interest in joining. The spirit girl then noticed something in the prize list called a mandrake, which immediately piqued Woo Jin's curiosity. Woo Jin mentioned he'd heard it was an extremely rare plant with a legendary reputation, and the spirit girl chimed in that it was a mystical herb. She went on about how a 10-year-old mandre is amazing even raw, and Woo Jin just savored the memory of its taste. She was convinced it was the perfect plant, the smell, the flavor, everything. Nothing else even came close. That subtle bitterness just makes every other flavor pop. You could throw it in any dish, grill it up, or heck, even make it the star of the show for dinner. But then Woojin dropped the bomb he wasn't joining the tournament. The spirit girl was floored, asking why when he totally had what it takes to win the whole thing. Woojin just shrugged, saying that being number one comes with all sorts of responsibilities, and that would cut into his precious cooking time. Besides, he added a big tournament like that would put him in the spotlight, and he'd much rather just stick to his kitchen without all the drama. The spirit girl sighed, saying his dedication to cooking was so intense he was practically a monk. She already knew it, of course, but hearing it again still made her tear up a little. Just then, Woojin's phone buzzed. It was Guak Cheol. He asked if the sect leader had a minute, and Woojin immediately wondered what was up. Guak Cheol explained he had something important to run by him, and offered to swing by his room if he was free. Woojin couldn't believe it. Did this guy not get how things worked around here? He told him that showing up at his room would look super weird to everyone else, so Woojin decided he'd just go meet him instead. He followed up, saying he'd bring some food over around dinner time so they could talk. Guak Cheol started to panic on the other end, but before he could get a word out, Woojin had already hung up. A moment later, Woojin could hear someone shouting from the building next door. He just figured Guak Cheol was so thrilled about the food that he couldn't contain his excitement. Later that evening, Woojin explained to Guak Cheol that he'd finally cracked the recipe for the Killer Bee dungeon dish. A little mint was all it took to balance out the flavors. After one bite, Guak Cheol's eyes widened. He declared it reminded him of a battlefield with blood and flesh strewn everywhere. So Woojin casually asked if he liked it. Guak Cheol confirmed it was incredible, a taste truly fit for the sect leader. Once the plates were clean, Woojin decided it was time to cut to the chase and asked what was on his mind. Guak Cheol started by asking if he'd seen the notice boards posted around campus. Woojin guessed right away. "You mean the tournament?" Guak Cheol nodded. He went on about how the academy's performance had been pretty pathetic for the last decade, and Woojin could already see the writing on the wall. And then came the big ask. Guak Cheol bowed low and practically begged Woojin to compete in the tournament to restore the academy's reputation. But Woojin shot him down flat, which left Guak Cheol completely stunned. Woojin just repeated that his life's purpose was cooking and cooking alone. Guak Cheol's mind raced, thinking maybe if Mandre was a prize, he could tempt him. But just then, Woojin announced that if they were done, he was heading out. Guak Cheol quickly insisted he couldn't back down that easily, pointing out that just getting Kim Cheol-guk on board had already done wonders for the Academy's image. He figured if the Academy actually did well in the championship, those pencil pushers in the administration would have to leave him alone until he retired. He knew having Baek-seok compete would probably get them some good results, but one slip-up could ruin everything. But Guak Cheol thought if the sect master himself was in it, there'd be zero chance of losing. Now he just had to figure out how to convince him, especially